Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
I returned from deployment expecting my wife's welcoming arms. Instead, I found her lover's sleek car parked in our driveway, a stab of betrayal sharper than any bullet I'd dodged overseas. Late-night whispers, suspicious spreadsheets, and my teenage daughter's hidden recordings exposed an unthinkable secret. But it wasn't only about stolen affection, money laundering, and twisted loyalties threatened to destroy everything. That day, I realized the real battlefield wasn't in the desert. It was here at home. If she thought I'd leave quietly, she was dead wrong. She would pay the price, and I would make certain of it. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I still remember the way the plane rattled as we came in to land. After months in the desert heat, that final touchdown back on American soil should have felt like a moment of triumph. But all I could think of was the 2-hour connection in Dallas, and whether Claire would be there at the airport to meet me once I made it to our hometown. She'd promised, after all, in the video calls, those calls that got shorter and more infrequent as time went on. I was dog-tired but jittery with anticipation. The men I served with gave me claps on the shoulder, telling me to enjoy my leave. A few of them had wives and kids waiting too. We parted with half smiles, that unspoken camaraderie that only comes from enduring mortar attacks and sleepless nights together. I carried that sense of survival with me off the airplane. I told myself everything was fine. I told myself not to read into Claire's occasional distance. Maybe she was overwhelmed with work. Maybe Ava needed her more than I did in those moments. But the second I stepped off the final flight at our small regional airport, there was no smiling face in sight, no hugging me from behind, no whispered welcome home. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no texts saying she was caught in traffic. Maybe there had been a mix-up in times. My chest felt tight, but I tried to brush it off. This was not the homecoming I'd dreamed about, but real life rarely matches the romance of daydreams. I collected my duffel bag from the carousel. The taxi driver, Sam, recognized me right away. He used to drop me off before each deployment and pick me up when I got leave. "Hey there, Colonel Morgan," he said, voice full of practiced cheer. "Guessing you're heading back home?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, thanks, Sam. Good to see you." My eyes stayed glued to the passing streets as we drove through my hometown. A wave of familiarity rushed in. The grocery store where Claire used to insist we buy organic produce, the diner Rachel's place where Ava and I would sneak milkshakes behind Claire's back if we were running errands without her. There were so many little memories that should have brought me comfort, but all I felt was a growing knot in my stomach. Something felt off, like an itch under my skin that wouldn't quit. By the time Sam pulled into our driveway, it was late afternoon. Warm orange sunlight cast long shadows across our neighborhood. I stared at the house, our 2-story place with the pale blue shutters that Claire picked out years ago. It all looked the same, and yet not. I caught a glint of sunlight off a black sedan in the garage, except it wasn't Claire's SUV. It looked newer, sleeker, more expensive than anything I could afford. I paid Sam, thanking him out of habit, and he left me standing there with my duffel bag at my feet. For a second, I wondered if maybe one of Claire's co-workers was borrowing our garage space. That made no sense, but I needed some explanation. My breath stilled. The air felt too thick. I grabbed the spare key from my pocket. My heart thumped in my chest, part anger, part fear. I'd seen enough suspicious things during my time in the military to know better than to walk in blind, but this was my own damn house. It felt like a trap. The walkway leading to the porch seemed longer than ever, every step echoing a creeping dread. When I slipped the key in the lock and pushed open the door, I was hit by a hush. It wasn't the cozy, lived-in quiet I'd cherished on lazy Sundays. It was the hush of a place where people kept secrets. I half expected to see Claire run down the hallway, scolding me for not calling from the airport. That never happened. I set my bag in the foyer. Immediately, I picked up on little details. A pair of men's shoes that definitely weren't mine near the coat rack, the faint smell of cologne in the air that I didn't recognize. I started hearing the sound of my own heartbeat more than anything else. My mind spiraled. I'd faced danger overseas, but stepping into my living room right then felt worse than any combat zone. I was still praying that maybe Andrew, though I didn't know him by name yet, was just an old friend or a distant cousin. Anything but the alternative. I stood there, scanning the open-plan living room. Everything was neat, as usual. Claire always kept a tidy house. The TV was off, no signs of life. The blinds were half drawn, letting slivers of sun stripe the hardwood floor. My anxiety spiked. I remembered the gun locked in my trunk. Did I dare bring it in? I was so lost in that thought I nearly missed the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs. I jerked around, expecting Claire or a stranger. But it was Ava, my 16-year-old daughter, wearing baggy sweatpants and a shirt. She stopped cold on the landing when she saw me. Her eyes went wide shock, then relief, but also something else. Worry. She rushed down the remaining steps and straight into my arms. I inhaled the scent of her shampoo, something flowery, and the knots in my stomach loosened for a brief moment. Dad? Her voice trembled. I didn't know you'd be here so soon. I wanted to surprise you, I murmured, hugging her tight. Where's your mom? Ava pulled away, hugging her arms protectively across her chest. She glanced toward the second floor. She's busy. She trailed off, not finishing the sentence. She looked uneasy, her gaze drifting to that black sedan in the garage. I forced myself to speak calmly, even though the adrenaline in my veins made me feel jumpy. Ava, whose car is that? She swallowed, and the way her lips pressed together let me know she was fighting back tears. Dad, let's go into the kitchen, okay? She said in a hushed tone, almost pleading. Just please. Before I could question it, she gripped my arm, guiding me away from the stairs. I felt numb, like I was moving through thick water. The truth I feared was all but spelled out. My mind lurched from one possibility to the next, searching for a scenario that wouldn't tear our family apart. But the men's shoes, the silent house, the strange car, they all pointed in one direction. Ava led me to the kitchen. There were half-empty coffee mugs in the sink, a faint odor of leftover pasta sauce. It looked so everyday, so normal, that my chest ached from the contradictions swirling inside me. Dad, Ava said, her voice shaky. Before you go upstairs, there's something you need to know. I took in her expression. She looked more grown up than I remembered. No longer the little girl I left behind 15 months ago. Honey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tell me. She pressed her lips together, a tear sliding down her cheek. She's been seeing someone. I don't think it's just personal either. There's something bigger. She paused, inhaling a trembling breath. I've got proof. An explosive rush of emotions welled up in my chest. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak, guilt for not being here. I bit down on the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. This was my homecoming. The horrifying realization that I might have lost everything in my absence. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I heard footsteps creaking again from above. I felt the hair on my arm stand on end, my pulse pounding in my ears. Whoever was up there was moving around. It wasn't a dream or a horrible joke. This was real. Ava must have read my expression because she grabbed my forearm. No, she whispered. Not like this. Don't do anything you'll regret, Dad. Please. Hear me out first. I stared at her, remembering the day she was born, how tiny she looked in my arms. Now she was standing in front of me, telling me something that shattered the life I thought I had. She was also begging me to keep my head. I realized she'd been dealing with this for who knows how long. The guilt surged fresh and hot in my gut. I exhaled. All right, I managed, my voice barely steady. Show me. I tried to ignore the heated flush creeping up my neck, the fury that made me want to storm upstairs and confront whoever dared step into my home, my marriage. But I owed Ava a chance to explain. She'd been here living this nightmare while I was busy surviving another one. She squeezed my hand, relief evident in her eyes. Come on, she said quietly, guiding me back down the hall. As we left the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of a family photo on the fridge, me in uniform, Claire leaning against me and Ava smiling wide. I nearly lost my footing at how painfully ironic it felt. In that moment, I understood that the real battleground wasn't in Afghanistan, it was right here. in my own house, and I had to handle it with more care and strategy than any mission I'd undertaken before. I followed Ava into the den, a smaller room off the main hallway where the old computer desk sat. It used to be just a casual space for paying bills or storing junk mail. Now, I noticed a brand new laptop on the desk, a small spiral notebook filled with scribbles, and a complicated chart taped to the wall above it. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It looked like some kind of detective's office. My bright, sweet 16-year-old had turned into an investigator while I was gone. The lamp cast a warm glow over her notes. Dates, phone numbers, times of day, maybe even license plates. It was all so methodical. Ava closed the door behind us, pressing her back to it like she wanted to seal off any noise from the rest of the house. I still heard footsteps creaking overhead, but they sounded more distant now. Maybe in the guest room or the master bedroom, my bedroom. The thought made me want to punch a hole in the wall. "Dad, promise me you'll keep calm," Ava whispered. "I've spent weeks piecing this together, waiting for you to come home. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to ruin your focus overseas." I ran my hand through my hair, the tips of my fingers tingling with nerves. "Ava, I'm trying, but you have to show me what you found because I'm on the verge of—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. The anger in my chest felt dangerous, barely contained. She nodded, turning to the desk. "Okay, so I started suspecting Mom was seeing someone around 3 months ago. She started coming home late, making excuses about big projects at work, but she'd be weirdly jumpy if I asked any questions." Ava opened the laptop, her expression far too serious for a teenager. "At first, I thought it was just an affair, Dad. I mean, that's bad enough. But then I noticed things about her phone calls. She'd talk in code or mention numbers that didn't make sense for normal business deals." I leaned forward, scanning the screen as she clicked through files labeled with cryptic names. "You recorded her calls?" I asked, eyebrows raised. She swallowed hard, looking a bit ashamed. "I know it's not exactly legal or ethical, but I had to do something. She was acting so suspicious. One time I overheard the name Andrew Hawkins and started digging. He's her boss, Dad. I think it's more than just a fling. He's into some messed up stuff." A flash of Andrew's expensive car in my garage stabbed at me. The name felt like a punch to the gut. "Jesus," I muttered, clenching my jaw. "What the hell are they doing?" Ava pulled up another folder. Inside were digital scans of spreadsheets, some kind of bank statements. She tapped one line highlighted in yellow. "See here. These are transactions into accounts that I can't trace easily. The amounts are huge, like tens of thousands at a time, sometimes more. Every deposit is followed by a withdrawal in a different name. I did some research and realized it's not just normal corporate stuff. It might be embezzlement or money laundering." I stared at the numbers, my stomach churning. "How the hell did you get all this?" With a shrug, she answered, "I borrowed Mom's work laptop one night when she was sleeping. She forgot to log out of her VPN. I know it's kind of extreme, but I had to find answers." I slowly sank into the desk chair. My legs felt shaky, and the swirl of shock was almost too much to handle. This was supposed to be the carefree days after I got back movie nights with Claire and Ava. Quiet dinners, catching up on everything I'd missed. Instead, I was discovering my wife's betrayal wasn't just emotional, there might be a criminal element. The love I'd felt for Claire all these years tangled with resentment, heartbreak, and a cold sense of betrayal. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Ava," I said quietly, "you shouldn't have had to do this alone. I'm sorry." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "I didn't want to tell you when you were out there. You had enough to worry about." I thought back to the nights I'd call Claire on video, her eyes darting around, always in a rush. She'd said, "Oh, sorry, the connection's bad," or "work's crazy." Part of me wanted so badly to believe her. Maybe I'd been blind on purpose. Maybe I just didn't want to face the possibility that my marriage was built on cracks. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to keep my composure. "All right," I managed. "All right. So you've been collecting evidence for weeks?" "Months," Ava corrected softly, pointing to a big calendar pinned on the wall. There were scribbles on certain dates, times circled in red. I wanted to be sure before I told you. And well, he's upstairs right now, Dad. The reality of Andrew's presence under my roof made me want to storm up there and drag him out by the collar. But Ava stepped in front of me as I stood. "Don't," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks again. "If you go up there now, you'll do something you'll regret, and they'll use it against you. I need you to hear me out, because I have a plan." A plan. My 16-year-old was telling me she had a plan to handle her mother's affair and potential white-collar crimes. The strangeness of it all would have made me laugh if I weren't reeling from heartbreak. I took a breath, forced myself to remain seated. "Go ahead," I said, my voice a raspy mess. She laid it out piece by piece. She'd recorded phone calls, pulled financial statements, even discreetly followed Claire a couple of times to see where she met Andrew. Every step was so meticulous, so out of character for a normal teenage girl that it scared me. But it also made me realize just how alone Ava felt in this mess. "They're embezzling money from the company," Ava said, pointing at the spreadsheets on the screen. "And from what I can tell, it's a lot. Maybe more than $1 million or even more than that. I can't be sure. They're planning something bigger, maybe skipping town. He's married to some lady named Victoria Hawkins who's on the company's board, so he's double-crossing her too. He's super careful, except with Mom, apparently. It's like they think no one's watching." I rubbed my temples. "Why not just call the cops?" "That's an option," she acknowledged. "But right now the evidence is all digital, and I collected it in questionable ways. If we just hand it over, they might dismiss it as illegally obtained or claim I doctored it. We need more. We need them to incriminate themselves in a way that's undeniable." I stared at her, struck by her determination. "You're talking about a sting operation, Ava. That's dangerous." She nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Dad, everything is already dangerous. I've had to live here with them, meeting behind closed doors, sometimes hearing them talk about me like an inconvenience. I overheard them discussing using your overseas accounts if they needed more funds." Her voice broke on that. "You have no idea how terrifying it's been. Mom's not the same person I used to know." A wave of protective rage came over me. "All right," I said hoarsely. "All right. We'll do it your way for now. But I'm not letting him walk out of here scot-free. Understand?" Ava nodded, relief mixing with fear. "I'll help you, I promise. But you've got to promise me something, too." "Name it." "Promise me you won't go upstairs with that gun of yours, or do anything that puts you in jail," she whispered. "I want them punished for what they've done, but if you do something reckless, you'll be the one paying the price. That's not what I want." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Finally, I let out a ragged breath. "I promise," I said, though the words tasted bitter. "I'll keep my head. But Ava, once I see this through, I swear to you, they won't get away with it." She gave a determined nod, stepping aside. "Then I'll show you the rest of what I've found. After that, Dad, we decide exactly how to make them pay." Overhead, the footsteps had stopped, replaced by eerie silence. I clenched my fists. Claire was somewhere up there with Andrew, living a fantasy that would come crashing down sooner than she realized. And I was going to be the one to lead that charge carefully, quietly, and with all the strategic precision I'd learned from years in the military. Ava's command center, as I started calling it in my head, was a chaotic blend of computer files, color-coded notes, and pinned printouts. On one wall, she'd strung up photos, she'd snapped grainy images of Claire with Andrew, sometimes hugging, sometimes sitting too close at restaurants. One particularly gut-wrenching shot showed them entering a downtown hotel together. I felt the sting of betrayal with each new detail. That was my wife in those pictures, the woman I'd promised to love and protect. Seeing her wearing that same blouse I'd bought her for our anniversary, but leaning into another man's arms was like a knife to the gut. Ava clicked through phone logs, pointing out patterns in Claire's calls. There were early morning calls, midday calls, late-night calls, sometimes lasting only a minute or two, as if they were checking in or confirming plans. After half an hour of scanning through what felt like miles of data, I leaned back in the squeaky office chair, exhaustion weighing me down. "I can't believe you've been carrying this on your own," I said to Ava, scrubbing a hand down my face. She shrugged, eyes downcast. "I had to. Mom, She didn't even try to hide it much at first. Whenever I asked where she was going, she'd say something about a client dinner. Then once, a few months ago, I came home earlier than she expected, and I heard them in the living room. She was laughing at his jokes, acting like a teenager. It made me sick. My jaw flexed as I fought the urge to march upstairs and confront them both. But the look in Ava's eyes reminded me of my promise. "How'd you figure out the money part?" I asked, gesturing toward the spreadsheets on the laptop. "That took a while," she admitted, flipping open a binder filled with printed statements. "I got suspicious when I overheard them talking about moving assets in offshore accounts. I knew that wasn't normal, so I, used Mom's phone while she was asleep. I forwarded emails to myself, emails from Andrew's personal account. They talked about skimming funds from his company, funneling them through other accounts. Mom was helping him disguise the transactions." I sighed, glancing at the timestamps on the emails. "Ava, this is crazy. You realize how illegal it is for them to do that and how risky it is for you to investigate it." She nodded. "But if I didn't do it, who would? It's not like Mom was going to have a moral epiphany. Andrew's apparently a smooth talker, and he keeps her convinced that once they have enough money, they can leave everything behind. He says he'll take care of her, but from what I can tell, he's just using her expertise as an accountant. He's letting her do the dirty work." I felt a surge of cold anger. "So she's risking our entire family's future for this guy," I muttered. "What about Andrew's wife? You found anything about her?" Ava tilted the screen again to show me a few saved news articles. "Her name is Victoria Hawkins. She's on the board of Andrew's company, which is apparently run by her father's investment group. Word is she's tough, but Andrew's been hiding the affair. Mom mentioned once that Victoria could wreck Andrew if she ever found out. I guess that's why they're funneling money. They might be planning to vanish with it." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. So Claire's wading into a cesspool of fraud, and she didn't think she'd get caught. Does your mother even realize how obvious she's been at home? Ava shook her head, frustration etched in her features. "When you left for deployment, she changed, Dad. She was anxious at first, then kind of moody. Eventually, it was like she just didn't care anymore. She went to dinners with Andrew, stayed out late, didn't bother to hide the cologne smell sometimes. Maybe she assumed I was too young or clueless to figure it out." The mixture of heartbreak and anger whirred inside me. I forced a slow, calming breath. "All right, we have a ton of data here, but we need an actual strategy. Because if we confront them with illegally obtained emails, they'll just say you hacked them. That could complicate everything." Ava nodded, pulling up a newly created document. "I drafted some ideas. Step 1 is to gather more legitimate evidence, maybe financial records from the public domain, or any official forms they've filed. Step 2 is to keep monitoring them, recording calls, tracking their movements, maybe discreetly alerting the right people at Andrew's company. Step 3 is deciding when to go public or contact the authorities." I scanned her bullet points, impressed but also overwhelmed. "This is a lot, and it's not a one-person job. I'm here now. We'll figure it out together." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "I'm so glad you're back, Dad," she whispered. "It was scary not knowing if you'd come home safe and then dealing with this." Guilt hit me again. Guilt for not seeing the signs, for leaving my daughter to cope with Claire's betrayal. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "It's not your fault. I'm proud of you for being so strong." We paused, listening for any noise upstairs. Silence. Maybe they'd heard me come in and decided to stay quiet. Or maybe Andrew had left somehow without me noticing. The idea that he could just stroll out of my house made my blood simmer. I got up and peeked through the window blinds. The black sedan was still there. I spotted a second car, Claire's SUV, parked on the street. Both vehicles sat silent. I wondered if they were hiding out, waiting for me to leave. Cowards. "Dad," Ava said softly, drawing me back to the desk, "we need to be patient. You always told me in your calls that patience can save a mission. This is our mission." I huffed out a humorless laugh. I never imagined my own home would become the battlefield. She shut the laptop and closed her binder of notes. "Let's take a break. I'll make us coffee or tea or something. We should figure out how we're going to act around Mom if she comes down. You can't let her know you suspect anything yet, or she'll bolt. It was hard to imagine hiding my fury, but I knew Ava was right. Claire and Andrew needed to believe they were still in control. Okay, I said finally. We keep calm, gather more evidence. But I can't promise that if I see him face to face, I'll just stand by quietly. Ava glanced at me nervously, then nodded. I get it. I hate him too, but we need to outsmart them, not just out-yell them. I studied her for a second, realizing how quickly my little girl had grown up. She'd changed from a carefree kid to this guarded young woman. The blame for that fell partly on me, partly on Claire, definitely on Andrew. No matter what, I was determined to make sure Ava came out of this with justice, closure, maybe even some peace of mind. All right, I said. Go start the coffee. Let's regroup in the living room. If your mom comes downstairs, we act normal. I'm not sure how, but we'll figure it out. She managed a tight smile. Sure, Dad. Then she slipped out of the den, leaving me alone with the mountain of evidence she'd gathered. I let my gaze wander over the photos again, Claire's face illuminated by the glow of a fancy restaurant sign, Andrew's hand on her back. They looked so casual, so comfortable in their deception. It made me sick. But maybe Ava was right. Rushing in with righteous anger might give them room to escape blame or twist it all on me. If we played it right, I could have a front row seat to their downfall. I couldn't bring myself to look at the phone records anymore. Instead, I stared at the last family photo pinned on the bulletin board, a snapshot of me hugging Claire while Ava grinned. The corners of it were worn, a subtle tear along one edge. Symbolic, I thought. Our family was tearing at the seams, but not for long. I promised Ava I'd do this right, and I intended to keep that promise. That evening felt surreal. Ava and I stayed downstairs, camped out in the living room, nursing mugs of coffee that went cold while we waited. The overhead lights cast long shadows across the floor, making the room feel both too big and too claustrophobic. We kept the TV off, neither of us wanting the noise to mask any sound from upstairs. We waited for Claire and Andrew to appear, but they never did. At some point, I rose from the couch, my knee protesting from an old service injury. Ava glanced at me with concern. Where are you going? I set my mug on the coffee table. Just grabbing something from my truck, I said quietly. She didn't have to guess what my sidearm was locked in the vehicle. Though I'd promised not to do anything rash, I couldn't shake the desire to have it close by. My entire sense of security had been shattered, replaced by suspicion. Outside, dusk had settled, painting the sky in streaks of purple and orange. The black sedan in the garage caught my eye again, half hidden by shadows. I moved quietly, unlocking my truck and retrieving a small metal toolbox. Buried inside was a pouch containing a few heavy bolts leftovers from a fix-it project, but big enough to do real damage if I dropped them into an engine block. Part of me hesitated, thinking, this is a line. If I cross it, there's no going back to normal. But normal was gone. That car symbolized how Andrew had invaded my life. I relatched the truck quietly and crept over to the garage door. It was open just a sliver, enough for me to slip inside. The interior light flickered on, illuminating the glossy paint of Andrew's high-end sedan. I recognized the make some European model with a price tag that probably exceeded my annual military pay. I allowed myself a bitter smile. Let's see how well it runs after tonight. I popped the hood as silently as I could, heart pounding. If Andrew heard me, so be it. My right hand shook slightly as I scattered a few bolts into the engine, letting them settle in places that would cause maximum damage once the engine started. I didn't want to slash tires or break windows that would be too obvious. This sabotage was subtle, something that would hopefully cripple the car later, far from here. When I finished, I gently lowered the hood, a swirl of satisfaction and shame rolling through me. I was a man in uniform, sworn to uphold the law, but I was also a husband betrayed, a father seeking justice for his daughter. In a single moment, I let the anger guide my hands. This was my first real strike in the battle to come. I slipped back out, toolbox in hand, and re-entered the house. Ava was standing by the kitchen doorway, eyes wide, arms folded. She didn't say anything, but her expression told me she suspected what I'd done. I just nodded once, placing the toolbox under the sink. We didn't need words to confirm it. Time crawled by. Eventually, we heard the soft shuffle of footsteps on the stairs. I tensed. Ava gripped my arm, cautioning me to stay calm. Claire's voice drifted toward us, a hushed, urgent tone, impossible to make out. Then a lower voice responded, presumably Andrew's. I stepped farther into the hall, half hidden behind the corner so I could see them without being seen. They descended side by side. Claire wore jeans and a casual sweater, hair slightly disheveled. Andrew was taller than me by a couple of inches, with a trim goatee and an expensive watch glinting under the hallway light. They paused at the bottom of the stairs when they spotted me. Claire's eyes widened, flicking between me and Ava. Andrew cleared his throat. Ethan. I didn't realize you were home." Inside, I fumed at his gall to address me so casually, like we were old friends. "Clearly," I replied, voice tight. "Just got in this afternoon." Claire's cheeks flushed. She tried to muster a smile that came off more like a grimace. "Honey, you're back early. Were you at work?" I asked, injecting just a hint of sarcasm. I let my eyes drift pointedly to Andrew, who was shifting uncomfortably near the door. She swallowed. "Andrew had some papers for me to review. We thought it'd be easier to bring them here so I could finalize some spreadsheets." She even held up a manila folder, as if to prove her lie. Ava stood behind me, silent but watchful. I could feel her presence like a tether, keeping me from snapping. "Papers, right?" I said flatly. "And you didn't pick me up at the airport because—" Claire's gaze darted to Andrew, then back to me. I didn't know you'd be flying in today," she stammered. "I thought you'd text or call." A swirl of resentment rose in my chest. "Guess I wanted to surprise you." Andrew cleared his throat again, stepping forward with an air of forced politeness. "I should probably head out," he said, glancing at Claire. "We can finalize the rest tomorrow at the office." He reached for the doorknob with a shaky hand. "Sure," I muttered. "Drive safe." The words were loaded. If he only knew about the sabotage in his precious sedan's engine. The tension in the hallway felt electric, nobody meeting each other's eyes for more than a second. With that, Andrew disappeared outside. Claire lingered a moment as if trying to gauge my reaction. "Ethan," she said softly, "I know this looks strange, but it's just work. I'm sorry about the airport. Let's talk in the morning, okay?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a nod. "Morning." She hesitated, then gave Ava a fleeting glance. Ava stared back, expression unreadable. Claire pressed her lips together and retreated upstairs, leaving me and Ava alone in the hallway under the dim lights. I looked down at the spot where Andrew had stood. I felt dirty, like the house had been tainted by his presence. But I kept a lid on my fury thanks to Ava's warning. We waited for the front door to close and the black sedan to drive off. After a moment, I moved to the window, peering out. Sure enough, Andrew's engine sputtered to life and he pulled away. A wicked satisfaction flickered through me, imagining those bolts bouncing around in the engine, ready to cause havoc. Ava exhaled, a shaky breath. That was intense. "Yeah," I murmured, leaning my forehead against the window frame. I felt the pulse in my neck hammering. "But we got through it. Now we just keep going." She nodded, stepping up next to me. Outside, the street looked peaceful like any other suburban night. Houses lit by warm porch lights, a few neighbors' TVs flickering behind blinds. If only they knew the soap opera happening in hours. Eventually, Ava touched my arm. "I guess we should get some sleep," she suggested, her voice subdued. "Tomorrow's another day." I couldn't argue. I turned away from the window and patted her shoulder. "You sleep in your room. Lock the door if you want. I'll be in mine. We'll talk more in the morning. Come up with the next step." She nodded, then quietly climbed the stairs. I listened for any sound from Claire, but it was all quiet. I stood alone in the hallway, the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen echoing. My mind buzzed with what was happening, what might come next. I thought about how, in war, you can't let your enemy know everything at once. You strike small, you gather intelligence, you sabotage carefully. My gut told me that the sabotage on Andrew's car was just the beginning. If he and Claire thought they could keep playing me for a fool, they were in for a rude awakening. When I finally headed upstairs, I half expected Claire to be waiting to start some sort of argument or explanation. But the master bedroom door was shut, no light creeping from underneath. I paused, ear pressed to the wood, hearing only faint breathing. She was probably pretending to be asleep or actually sleeping off the stress of nearly getting caught. I stepped into the spare room across the hall, too on edge to sleep beside her. I'd done enough sleeping alone overseas. One more night was nothing. Lying there on a bed that smelled faintly of stale linens, I stared at the ceiling. My heart thudded, slow but heavy, as I replayed the night's events. They were foolish enough to think they had it all under control. Let them keep thinking that, I told myself. Let them dig themselves deeper, because I was about to show them just how wrong they were. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees in our yard. I closed my eyes and waited for morning, already planning my next move. The quiet hum of the house felt charged with secrets. Claire and Andrew had no idea just how closely I'd be watching or how far I'd go to protect what was mine. I woke up the next morning still on edge, my mind full of half-formed plans and a mounting determination. Claire had already left for work, at least that's what Ava reported when I found her in the kitchen, chewing on dry cereal. We exchanged a solemn look, neither of us quite ready to rehash last night's tension. "Dad," she began quietly, "we need to figure out the next move. Are you going to talk to someone about this?" I nodded, placing a mug under the coffee machine. "I'm meeting Marcus Reeves this afternoon. You remember him, right? My old friend, he's a lawyer now." Ava's gaze flickered with relief. Good. Maybe he'll know how to handle all these documents without Mom or Andrew finding out. The coffee trickled into my cup, the slow drip matching the steady pulse of my growing resolve. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll fill him in. But we've got to be careful. That means you keep all your files locked down, okay?" She set her cereal bowl in the sink and opened the fridge for milk. "I've actually been working on that," she said. "Encrypted folders, hidden drives. I'm not the best hacker in the world, but I know enough to stay out of sight." It was strange hearing my teenage daughter talk about digital security like it was second nature. Part of me felt grateful she had the skill. Part of me mourned the innocence she'd lost. "Just be sure you're not leaving any traces," I cautioned. "Andrew's shady, but he's probably smart enough to suspect something if he sees odd logs on your mom's accounts." Ava nodded sharply. "Yeah, don't worry, I've got it handled." After breakfast, she headed off to school, backpack slung over one shoulder. I watched her go, a protective ache settling in my chest. She was too young to be caught in the crossfire of corporate fraud and marital betrayal, but here we were. By midday, I drove downtown to meet Marcus at a small coffee shop near the courthouse. The place was crowded with locals grabbing lunch or fueling up on caffeine, the murmur of conversation filling the air. I found him in a corner booth, scanning some paperwork. "Ethan," he greeted me, sliding the documents aside. "Long time no see. I heard you were back." His voice held genuine warmth, but concern etched his features. I ordered a black coffee from the passing server, then faced him. "Yeah, I'm back. Wish I could say things were great on the home front." My jaw clenched involuntarily. Marcus had known Claire and me for years, way before Ava was born. He picked up on my tension immediately. "What's going on?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I need legal advice," I said simply. "Claire's involved with someone else, and from what I've pieced together, they're stealing large sums of money from his company. Possibly more. I need to protect my daughter, and I need to protect myself. I'm not letting them drag us down if this blows up." Marcus let out a low whistle. "That's a lot. You have evidence?" "Plenty, but some of it was obtained in ways that might not be fully above board." I told him about Ava's recordings, the forwarded emails, the suspicious transactions. I was careful not to mention names loudly, though. The coffee shop was busy, and I didn't want half the town hearing this. Marcus frowned, tapping a pen against the table. "First off, I'd normally advise going straight to the authorities with proof of fraud, but if your daughter used questionable methods like hacking or clandestine recordings, it could hurt the case. Defense attorneys love picking that apart." I nodded grimly. "Yeah, that's why I haven't called the cops yet. What do you suggest?" He scratched at his chin. For the marital side, you have grounds for divorce adultery, potential financial misconduct. If you want to proceed with that, we can start drawing up papers. But if you want a bigger plan, to expose them thoroughly, you'll need verifiable evidence from official channels. Maybe you let them slip up publicly, like forcing them to confirm the money transfers on record. That way, it's not just your daughter's info. It's the company itself confirming the fraud. The waitress dropped off my coffee, flashing a polite smile. Once she was gone, Marcus continued. We can also protect Ava by making sure she's never publicly seen as the whistleblower. If this Andrew is as powerful as you say, we need to keep her out of his crosshairs. I sipped the coffee, mind whirling. I won't let him touch her, I said. I also want to ensure Claire can't claim I'm some violent soldier with a vendetta. She's pulled away from me, no telling what lies she's been feeding people. Marcus's face grew serious. Ethan, I know your temper can flare when you're pushed. Don't give her that ammunition. Keep everything clean on your end. Document whatever you can. I'll help with the legal stuff, but keep me in the loop, all right? I shook his hand. Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate it more than you know. Outside, the sun beat down on the sidewalk. I turned up my collar against the slight chill in the winter air, though it felt more like nerves than actual cold. Talking with Marcus reassured me that I had a path forward, but it was a delicate one. On a whim, I decided to stop by Rachel's diner before heading home. The place had been a fixture of our neighborhood for as long as I could remember. Walking inside, I immediately smelled grilled onions and coffee, a comforting scent that clashed with the turmoil in my head. Rachel, a sturdy woman in her late 50s, greeted me with a big smile. Colonel Morgan, heard you were back in town. What can I get you today? I slid onto a stool at the counter. Hey, Rachel. Just a coffee refill and maybe a quick bite. I wasn't really hungry, but I needed an excuse to linger. While she poured me a fresh cup, a man 2 stools down looked over. He was flipping through a local newspaper. If it ain't the Colonel, he said, giving me a polite nod. You hear about Andrew Hawkins's new club membership fiasco? I frowned slightly. Club membership fiasco? Rachel gave a dismissive wave. Oh, you know how rumors run in this town, but apparently Andrew's been bragging about some fancy private club he joined. Charging it all to the company, or so folks say. Heard it from a friend of a friend who works at the golf course. Could be nothing, or could be something big. I exchanged a meaningful glance with Rachel, feeling a spark of interest. Andrew Hawkins, huh? I pretended mild curiosity. He must be doing well for himself. The man laughed humorlessly. Doing well or scamming well? I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. Rachel set my coffee down. You sure picked an interesting time to come home, she said under her breath. Guess so? I forced a small grin, but inside, gears were turning. This was what Marcus was talking about, letting Andrew's arrogance become a noose around his neck. I finished my coffee and paid. Rachel patted my hand, giving me a sympathetic smile that said she suspected I was dealing with more than just small-town gossip. I made a mental note to come back soon. A local diner was often the heartbeat of a community's rumors, and I needed every rumor I could get if I intended to widen the cracks in Andrew's facade. By the time I left, the late afternoon sun was slanting across the street. My phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Mom's not home yet. She said she's working late. Andrew's office is across town. Probably together. It ended with a crying face emoji that stung my heart. My chest tightened as I pictured Claire at Andrew's side, but a cold resolve settled over me. Soon enough, I thought. Soon, their arrogance would lead them to slip up. With Marcus's legal advice, Ava's digital savvy, and the rumors swirling around Andrew's lavish spending, we had the makings of a plan. I headed back to the house, determined to set up more secure backups of Ava's files and keep everything as discreet as possible. Our real challenge, though, was timing pushing Andrew and Claire just enough so they exposed themselves, but not so hard that they vanished into thin air with that stolen money. Marcus had said it best. We needed verifiable evidence. That meant letting them believe they were untouchable, at least for a little while longer. As the evening shadows lengthened, I parked in my driveway, gazing up at my darkened windows. This was a war, all right, but a subtle one. No bullets, no bombs, just lies, secrets, and a ticking clock. And I'd be damned if I let them win. I woke before dawn the next day, unsettled dreams of combat blending with images of Claire and Andrew. Sleep felt more like a restless drift, and the moment I opened my eyes, I knew there was no going back under. My phone glowed on the nightstand. Ava had left me a message. "We need to talk before I leave for school. 7 a.m. in the den?" I forced myself up, got dressed, and made coffee. The house was quiet as ever, though I heard Claire rummaging upstairs, presumably getting ready for work. At exactly 7, I found Ava in the den, our makeshift war room. She offered a tense smile, then tapped at her laptop. "Morning, Dad. I was poking around last night, checking Andrew's social media profiles from fake accounts. Turns out he was out at some exclusive restaurant with Mom. He posted pictures with a group, but, ironically, you can see Mom's reflection in a window behind them. She didn't appear in the main photo, so I guess they think they're being sneaky." My stomach twisted at the mention of them dining out, but I forced it down, focusing on the bigger picture. "Any sign of business talk?" "Hard to say," she replied, turning the laptop to show me an Instagram screenshot. But one of the captions read, "Big moves tonight. No limits winning." "He's bragging about something, that's for sure." "Typical," I muttered. "He loves the high life. Sooner or later, it'll be his downfall." Just then, Claire breezed past the open doorway. She paused, eyes flicking over the two of us and the laptop. "Morning," she said stiffly. "I'm heading out early. Andrew needs me at the office for a major deadline." My fists clenched under the desk, but I made sure my face stayed neutral. "Sure, have a good day," I said, feigning normalcy. She gave a tight nod and hurried off. A moment later, we heard the front door close. Ava let out a breath she'd been holding. "She's really bold about all this, isn't she?" I stared at the empty hallway. She'll regret it soon enough. We spent the next hour refining our digital security. Ava updated passwords, encrypted her folders, and backed them up to an external drive hidden in her closet. "It's not unbreakable," she warned, "but Andrew would have to be suspicious first. I doubt he thinks a teenage girl is outsmarting him." That particular truth gave me grim satisfaction. Good. Let's keep it that way. After she left for school, I booted up my own laptop, an older model that I'd used overseas. I started drafting a timeline of Andrew's suspected moves. Clues from last night's diner gossip about his extravagant membership, social media posts bragging about business deals, plus the suspicious bank statements Ava uncovered. The more we compiled it, the more I saw a pattern. Andrew wanted to move a sizable chunk of stolen money offshore, but he needed Claire's accounting know-how to keep it hidden. Late morning, I got an unexpected call from an unknown number. My gut told me to answer. "Hello?" A clipped, confident female voice spoke. "Mr. Morgan, this is Patricia Hawkins. I believe we met once at a corporate holiday event. I'm Andrew's wife." I felt my pulse quicken. "Right," I said carefully. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Hawkins?" She let out a humorless laugh. "I'm calling because Andrew mentioned something about you returning from overseas. He seemed unnerved, which is unlike him. I don't want to pry, but we're dealing with some internal issues at the company, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of it." My heart pounded. Did she suspect something? "Internal issues?" I repeated, keeping my tone neutral. "Yes," she replied. "I'm the audit committee chair. I've noticed irregularities in certain accounts. Andrew's been dismissive, and your wife's name came up as well. I'm not accusing you of anything, but if you have any insight, I'd appreciate a heads-up. I can't shake the feeling that something's off." I took a slow breath, trying to steady my thoughts. Patricia was a formidable person, by all accounts. If she sniffed out the fraud, Andrew and Claire could be in trouble sooner than expected, perhaps too soon for my plan to fully unfold. Still, the opportunity was tempting. "Mrs. Hawkins, I don't have direct knowledge of the company," I said carefully, "but I can tell you that Andrew's behavior has caught my attention as well. Maybe we can talk in person?" A slight hesitation. "All right, let's do that. Lunch sometime next week?" "That works," I agreed, giving her a day I knew Claire would be out with Andrew. After we hung up, I exhaled a shaky breath. My mind buzzed with possibilities. If Patricia was suspicious, she could become an unwitting ally in exposing Andrew's crimes. But I had to tread lightly. She might also run straight to Andrew if she sensed I was targeting him. A short while later, I met with Ava at Rachel's diner for a quick lunch. We picked a booth in the back where the chatter of the lunch crowd gave us some cover. Rachel, friendly as ever, brought us iced tea and grilled cheese sandwiches. As we ate, I told Ava about Patricia's call. Her eyes widened. So she basically admitted something's off at the company. Sounds like it, I said. She's the audit committee chair and Andrew's wife. Hell of a dynamic. If she finds concrete proof, that might blow everything up before we're ready. Ava bit her lip. Or maybe we can help her find the right proof at the right time so it all comes crashing down in a way that benefits us. I half smiled at her cunning. You're thinking like a strategist, kiddo. She lowered her voice even more. By the way, I keep hearing kids at school talk about Andrew. A couple of them have parents who work at his firm. They said there's chatter about an internal review some big shot named Valerie Brooks is rumored to be flying in to investigate the financial records. Might be the board's doing. I chewed on that, mentally connecting the dots. That fits with Patricia's suspicions. If they do a formal audit, Andrew will scramble to hide the missing money. That means forging more documents or trying to push blame onto someone else, possibly onto your mom. Ava's hand clenched around her fork. We can't let that happen, Dad. Mom is guilty of her own choices, but Andrew's definitely the ringleader. I nodded. We'll gather all the data we can, then let them hang themselves with their own lies. One slip, that's all it'll take. As we stood up to pay, Rachel motioned me over discreetly. Ethan, I heard a rumor that Andrew's car broke down outside town last night. Left him stranded. Transmission or something. He had to get a tow. Just thought you'd find that interesting. I managed to keep a straight face, though Ava shot me a knowing look. Huh, I said mildly. Thanks for the heads up, Rachel. We left the diner, stepping into bright daylight. Despite the seriousness of everything, a tiny spark of satisfaction warmed my chest at the reminder that Andrew's beloved car had met a small comeuppance. It was petty, maybe, but it reminded me that I still held the reins of my own vengeance. With each new piece of intel, the tension around Claire and Andrew's scheme tightened like a wire. One wrong move, and everything would snap. As I drove Ava back to school for her afternoon classes, I realized how carefully we had to orchestrate this. Patricia's involvement, the rumored internal review, Andrew's arrogance, these could all accelerate the downfall or blow up in my face if I miscalculated. One thing was certain. The slow war was in full swing. I intended to be the last man standing. 3 days slipped by in a tense blur. Claire spent long hours out, claiming deadlines and emergency audits. Ava and I maintained our watchful routine. She scoured digital footprints at night, and I juggled updates with Marcus Reeves about potential legal strategies. The house felt more like a cold war zone than a home. Then, one crisp Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. I'd just poured myself a cup of coffee. Ava was upstairs doing homework, or possibly comparing more bank statements. As I opened the door, I blinked in surprise to find Edward and Margaret Hudson Clare's parents standing stiffly on the porch. Edward wore an immaculate gray suit, Margaret in a tailored dress. They looked like they'd come straight from a country club photo shoot. Edward forced a thin smile. Ethan, we've been trying to call Claire's cell, but she hasn't picked up. My gut tightened. They were the last people I wanted to deal with right now. She's out, I replied curtly, not bothering to hide my wariness. You can come in if you'd like. Margaret pursed her lips as she stepped inside, eyes sweeping over the living room as if she expected to find dust or disarray. We heard some concerning rumors, she said, voice trembling on the edge of condescension, about Claire's involvement with her boss. I narrowed my eyes, so they already had an inkling. Rumors, huh? Edward cleared his throat. Yes, well, these things happen, but we wanted to be sure you weren't about to do anything rash like divorcing our daughter or tarnishing the family name. Heat flared in my chest, but I reined it in. I see. So you're worried about the family name, not about Claire's happiness or wrongdoing? Margaret let out a tight laugh. Don't be dramatic, Ethan. We know you have certain emotional tendencies. We came here to help. If Claire's done something ill-advised, we can fix it. We have resources, connections. I folded my arms. Sounds like you're offering a bribe. Again. Their silence answered for them. My mind flashed back to years ago when they tried to buy me off because they thought their daughter was marrying beneath her station. The memory still burned like hot coal. Ava padded downstairs, wearing a baggy sweatshirt and an expression of wariness. "Grandma, Grandpa, I didn't know you were in town." Margaret immediately plastered on a smile. "Ava, darling, we came to see your mother. Have you spoken to her? She's not answering calls." Ava exchanged a glance with me. "She's busy, I guess. But she never mentioned you were coming." Edward sighed heavily, fiddling with the gold cufflinks on his sleeves. "No, we didn't exactly schedule this visit. We heard something that made us concerned, so we hopped on a flight." I gestured for them to sit, but neither budged from where they stood. Fine by me. "Concerned about what exactly?" I asked, my tone frosty. Margaret's gaze darted to Ava, then back to me, clearly not wanting to speak too freely in front of her granddaughter. "Let's just say we heard Andrew's name and possible irregularities in certain financial areas. We can't afford a public scandal, Ethan." There it was, the pure disdain for bad publicity. I inhaled slowly. "Let me guess. You want me to keep quiet, turn a blind eye, and let you wave your checkbook around to hush everything up?" Edward's expression hardened. "We're trying to protect Claire, and you, and Ava. If word gets out that she's involved in something criminal..." I took a step forward, leveling my gaze at him. "If word gets out, it's because she made her own bed. She's the one sleeping with Andrew and messing around with stolen funds. This is on her, not me, not Ava." Margaret's face pinched in what might have been genuine worry. "That's precisely why we're here. We can smooth things over, Ethan. We have a family foundation that might be able to absorb certain losses or restructure certain transactions to avoid an investigation." My stomach churned with disgust. They were basically offering to launder money on top of everything else. Ava bristled at my side, knuckles whitening around the banister. "I have no intention of accepting your hush money," I said coldly. "And I certainly won't be letting you bury any wrongdoing under your foundation's ledger. If Claire's mixed up with Andrew's crimes, she'll face the consequences." Edward's nostrils flared. "Don't be naive. Everyone has a price. We're offering a way out your daughter's future can remain spotless. You think colleges want to admit a kid from a scandal-ridden home?" Ava's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" she managed, voice shaking. "You'd drag me into this?" Margaret raised both hands as if to calm the air. "We're only saying that scandal affects everyone. We're prepared to handle damage control if you just sign certain agreements, keep certain matters out of the press." I stared at them, jaw clenched so tight it ached. This was the arrogance that had molded Claire, the sense of entitlement that money and prestige solved everything. "Get out," I finally said. "I'm done listening to this." Edward stiffened, but Margaret tried again. "Ethan, be reasonable. You're a decorated officer, a calm mind. This helps all of us. We keep it quiet. Andrew sorts out his issues and Claire goes back to normal. No one has to know." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You think you can buy forgiveness for what Claire's done to me? Or keep the stolen money from surfacing? Sorry, but we're past that." They stared at me for a beat, realization dawning that their checkbook wouldn't sway me. Edward's lips thinned. "Very well. But if you hurt our family's reputation, you'll leave us no choice but to fight back legally, financially, whichever way we must." Ava touched my shoulder, silently pleading for me not to explode. I forced myself to speak in a measured tone. "You do what you need to do." "I'll do what I need to do to protect my daughter and me from the fallout of your daughter's choices." Margaret's eyes glistened with either tears or frustration. "We'll be at the country inn if Claire decides to pick up her phone. I hope you reconsider, Ethan." With that, they swept out of the house, the door banging shut behind them. Ava let out a shaky breath. That was intense. I rubbed my forehead. They have no idea how serious this is. Or they do and just don't care. They're determined to throw money at the problem to protect themselves. Ava's expression hardened. "We can't let them keep enabling Mom. She'll never face reality if they bail her out like this." I nodded, recalling something Marcus mentioned about cornered animals being the most dangerous. The Hudsons had deep pockets, and if they discovered the extent of Andrew and Claire's fraud, they might do something truly drastic to cover it. "We just have to keep building our case," I said quietly. Ava and I headed back to the den. She pulled up a new file of data, face grim. Dad, look at this. I found references to a shell account with the same name as Grandpa's foundation. They might already be funneling money in from Andrew's operation. My pulse quickened as I skimmed the figures. This was bigger than I'd realized, Andrew's greed meshing with Claire's parents' unscrupulous willingness to preserve the family's image. Suddenly, the puzzle made sense. The Hudson Foundation was, knowingly or not, part of the scheme. I exhaled, pressing my palm flat on the desk. Looks like we're not just fighting Andrew anymore. We're up against her entire family. Ava nodded. They messed with the wrong people. A cold determination settled in my chest. Edward and Margaret thought I'd fold under their pressure, but they'd just shown me a bigger target. If they were complicit, they'd go down too. This was no longer just about an unfaithful wife. It was a web of entitlement and corruption, and I was done playing nice. A week passed in a tense dance of caution and covert moves. Every day I reviewed new intelligence bank statements, text messages, whispered rumors from Rachel's diner. Meanwhile, Claire continued her routine of leaving early, arriving home late, and slipping into bed without a word. We existed in the same house like strangers, or perhaps like enemies under a fragile truce. One evening, just as I was about to power down my laptop, Ava burst into the den, eyes lit with a fierce excitement. "Dad," she said breathlessly, "I think I found something huge. You know that hush-hush company event Andrew's hosting tonight at the downtown ballroom? Mom left a note saying she had important business. Well, Patricia Hawkins will be there too, overseeing some new proposed budget expansions." I scanned through the event details on Ava's screen. It was basically a high-profile meet-and-greet for investors, under the guise of launching a philanthropic wing. This might be the perfect storm, I said quietly. Andrew can't resist showing off. Patricia's suspicious, so if she corners him in public. Ava nodded. We just need to push the right information her way. I paused, heart thumping. We already have an open line of communication with her. She's suspicious of Andrew. I could drop an anonymous hint about irregularities in the budget. She'd confront him with the entire board present. The idea formed swiftly in my mind. Andrew's forced to answer tough questions, and Claire inevitably steps in to defend him, revealing their closeness. Ava grinned. Do it. You've got her number. Send her something cryptic that piques her interest. Or forward a snippet of those suspicious transactions. Enough to look legit, but not so much that they suspect you. Exactly. My fingers trembled with adrenaline as I typed a carefully worded text to Patricia's private line. Check the proposed philanthropic budget lines for hidden transfers. Doesn't match official ledger. Trust your gut. I hesitated, then hit send. Immediately, my phone screen announced the message was delivered. We looked at each other in silence, the magnitude of our next move sinking in. If this worked, Andrew would be blindsided in front of influential people. Claire, desperate to protect him, might do something reckless. It was a risk if they realized I was behind it. They might double down on hiding the money. I decided to attend the event quietly, lurking on the sidelines. Not as an invited guest, but as an observer. Ava wanted to come, but I insisted she stay home for her own safety. I'll be fine, I reassured her. I just need to see how Andrew and Claire handle the confrontation. That night, I dressed in a dark suit, the same one I used for formal military functions. My reflection in the mirror felt foreign. The man staring back at me had a hardness in his eyes that I didn't recognize from years past. I was no longer just Colonel Morgan returning from duty. I was a husband scorned, a father on a mission. I arrived at the downtown ballroom, blending in among the clusters of well-dressed investors and staff. The place buzzed with manufactured enthusiasm. Waiters carrying trays of champagne flutes, guests mingling near display panels about the company's new philanthropic initiative. The irony made my stomach twist. They were marketing themselves as charitable while secretly funneling money to offshore accounts. I moved to a corner near the back, half concealed by a decorative potted palm. From there, I spotted Andrew in the center of the room, commanding attention in a tailored tuxedo. Claire stood beside him. Her black dress hugging her figure, she looked every bit the polished accountant. A pang shot through me at the memory of how proud I used to be of her confidence and poise. The clock ticked by, and I began to wonder if my tip to Patricia had landed. Then, quite suddenly, the energy shifted. Patricia Hawkins entered, flanked by 2 board members, her expression steely. She glided across the floor, ignoring the polite greetings of lesser executives. Andrew's bright smile faltered when he noticed her approach. Claire tensed, eyes darting around. "Andrew," Patricia said, her voice cutting through the chatter, "we need to have a word about the philanthropic budget." Andrew forced a laugh. "Patricia, can't we discuss that privately? Let's not disrupt the event." She stood firm, crossing her arms. "The proposed funding routes appear inconsistent. I found multiple references to accounts that don't exist on our official ledger." A hush fell over the nearby guests. Some discreetly pretended not to listen, others openly stared. Claire stepped forward, voice overly bright. "Patricia, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. I handled some of those spreadsheets myself." Patricia arched an eyebrow. "I see. Then perhaps you can explain why there are transfers labeled philanthropy, but routed to an international bank we have no record of." Andrew's face tightened. He shot Claire a warning look that practically screamed, "Fix this!" "We'll straighten it out," he insisted, placing a hand on Claire's back. "Claire is my best accountant. She can verify the numbers." His hand lingered on her a little too long, and I spotted a flicker of realization in some of the spectators' eyes. A woman in a navy blue dress, possibly another board member, whispered something to the man beside her. Whispers can be lethal in corporate environments, especially regarding rumored affairs. Claire's face flushed. "Right. I'll prepare a full explanation. It might just be a placeholder or a mislabeled line item." Patricia's stare was ice cold. "An entire chain of mislabeled line items? Andrew, this is exactly the kind of sloppiness I warned you about." Andrew forced another laugh. "Let's not cause a scene, Patricia." He motioned for the live band to play softer, clearly wanting to avoid more attention. But the damage was done. People were already filming on their phones. Word would spread that the CFO's wife had confronted Andrew about suspicious finances. As I took it all in, a quiet thrill shot through me, a small victory indeed. From my vantage point, I saw Claire whisper something frantically to Andrew, stepping closer than a mere coworker should. Several eyes followed that move. The tension between them was obvious enough to be suspicious. More whispers rippled across the guests. Patricia frowned at Claire. "Miss Morgan, I suggest you forward me the complete ledger by Monday morning. No more illusions. If I don't see everything, I'll call an emergency board meeting to discuss your department's accountability." Andrew exhaled, gripping Claire's elbow as if to steady himself. "Of course," he said, voice strained. "We'll have it to you by Monday." Then he plastered on a forced grin and turned to the assembled watchers. "Show's over, folks. Enjoy the evening." But the atmosphere had soured. The once lively crowd muttered in small clusters, casting curious glances at Andrew and Claire. Meanwhile, Patricia stalked off, a phone already in her hand, likely calling her own auditors. I stepped back further into the shadows, allowing the waves of confusion to swirl around the room. Claire leaned into Andrew, whispering fiercely with desperation in her eyes. He nodded stiffly, then led her away from the center of attention. The rest of the onlookers either returned to half-hearted mingling or discreetly left. No one wanted to be tied to a scandal. I left soon after, slipping out unnoticed. My phone buzzed with a message from Ava. Saw a post about confrontation at the event. Looks like it made social media. Good job, Dad. Yes, it was a good job, but it was also just the beginning. Andrew's facade had cracked, and Claire's part in his scheme was becoming more public by the minute. Even though it was a small victory for our side, it carried bigger stakes now. Andrew and Claire would know they were under the microscope. They'd either scramble for damage control or accelerate their plan to stash the stolen funds. Driving home in the quiet darkness, I felt the weight of what was still to come. Edward and Margaret might try to bury the scandal. Andrew might lash out in desperation. Claire might do whatever it took to maintain her illusions. But for the first time, I saw real fear in their eyes, fear that came from losing control. And that, I thought grimly, was exactly the space I needed to deliver the next blow. Late Sunday evening, the quiet outside my home felt like the pause before a thunderstorm. Ava sat in the den, headphones on, sifting through her latest digital logs. I paced the living room, mentally replaying every step we'd taken to weaken Andrew and Claire's alliance. The confrontation at that corporate event had spread across social media, fueling rumors about financial misconduct. We knew from local chatter that Andrew was panicking. Yet somehow, Claire had spent the weekend locked away in emergency meetings, refusing to talk to either me or Ava. The clock in the hallway ticked toward midnight when headlights flashed through the front windows. I parted the curtains and froze. Andrew's car, or a rental maybe, given that we sabotaged his precious sedan, lurched to a stop, almost grazing our mailbox. He stepped out, stumbling. Even from a distance, I could see he was in bad shape. "Dad?" Ava's voice came from behind me, worried. "Is that him?" I nodded. "Upstairs." "Now," I whispered, flipping the deadbolt on the door. "Lock your door, and don't come out unless I say so." Her eyes shone with both fear and defiance. "Be careful." I waited until she disappeared up the stairs, then watched as Andrew staggered onto my porch. Before I could decide whether to open the door, he pounded on it hard enough to rattle the frame. His voice slurred with alcohol cut through the stillness. "Ethan, I know you're in there." I inhaled a steadying breath and opened the door a crack, leaving the chain on. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He gave a brittle laugh, leaning against the doorframe. His tie was loose, and the smell of whiskey reeked off him. You did this. I know you or your brat leaked info to Patricia. Now everything's gone to shit." "Keep your voice down," I hissed. "My daughter's asleep." He slammed his palm against the door, making the chain jolt. "Don't pretend you care about being quiet. You just want me to crash and burn, right?" I took a deep, quiet breath. Andrew was unraveling, and he was too drunk to realize how easily I could record him. Calmly, I slipped my phone from my pocket, started the camera, and set it on a side table facing the crack in the door. "You'd better leave," I warned, loud enough for the recording to catch. "We can talk another time." He let out a hollow bark of laughter. "Oh, we'll talk now, because thanks to your meddling, I can't find half the money we stashed in those accounts. Patricia's got the board breathing down my neck, and Claire's no help either. She's freaking out, claiming she didn't move the funds." "So who did?" My heartbeat thundered. He was admitting to fraud right on my porch. Perfect. I forced a bland shrug. "No idea what you're talking about, Andrew." He cursed under his breath, then raked his fingers through his hair. "I'm not leaving until I get some answers. Claire said she could handle you, but looks like she failed." He wobbled, casting a glance toward the street. A few neighboring porch lights flicked on people likely hearing the commotion. "Come on, Colonel, open this damn door before I break it down." An undercurrent of real threat laced his voice. I was about to retort when Claire's car sped up behind his, parking awkwardly at the curb. She stumbled out, wearing a wrinkled blouse and skirt. "Andrew!" she hissed, hurrying over. "Stop it! You're making a scene!" He glared back at her, then flung an accusatory finger in my direction. "Your husband's the one playing puppet master here." Before Claire could respond, movement stirred in the neighboring yard. Old Mr. Jensen stood on his porch, phone in hand, likely ready to call the police if violence broke out. Tension spiked. Claire rubbed her temples. "Andrew, I told you not to come here. Let's go somewhere else." "No!" he roared, voice echoing across the dark street. "This lying bastard needs to tell me where he stashed that missing money. Did he hack your laptop? Did he feed everything to that old friend of his, the lawyer?" My chest clenched with both anger and satisfaction. He was incriminating himself more with every word. Behind me, the phone's camera was still recording. I silently thanked the late hour for the hush that made Andrew's drunken rant crystal clear. Claire finally noticed the phone angled in the hallway. Her eyes widened in panic as she realized what I was doing. "Andrew, shut up!" she hissed, voice low. "You're digging our grave!" But it was too late. Andrew saw the phone's red light through the doorway crack and froze, then let out a string of profanity. "You son of a... Are you recording me?" He lunged forward, rattling the door chain again, trying to reach inside. I slammed the door shut and slid the chain off. My instincts from deployment kicked in. Keep your distance. Remain calm. Another wave of headlights swept across the scene. I heard the squeal of brakes and then a neighbor shouting, "I called the cops!" Andrew didn't care. He flung the door wide, stepping into my entryway with a wild look. Claire stood behind him, eyes full of desperation. "Ethan, please," she pleaded. "Just turn off the phone. We can handle this privately. We'll fix everything." My throat felt dry. "No." There's no going back. I signaled to the phone, making sure it had them both in view. "You two have scammed your company, lied to everyone, and destroyed this family." My voice was steadier than I felt. "Now you're at my door, screaming about missing embezzled money in front of the whole neighborhood." Andrew's chest heaved with rage. He balled his fists, looking like he might swing. "I ought to kill you," he spat. I stood my ground. "Go ahead, Andrew. You're already burying yourself." A flash of red and blue lights strobed through the windows, bathing the living room in pulsing color. The police had arrived faster than I expected. 2 officers entered cautiously, one hand resting on a holster. "Everyone, calm down," barked the lead cop, a woman named Officer Pearson. "This is private property. Sir, step away." Andrew glared at her but stumbled back. Claire looked like she wanted to vanish into the floor. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding," she began with forced politeness. Pearson eyed Andrew's drunken state and the chaos around us. "We got multiple noise complaints. Mind telling me what's going on here?" Andrew tried to speak, but his words slurred. I answered first, voice tight. "This man is trespassing on my property. He's intoxicated, threatening me. I've got the entire rant on video." The other officer, a tall man, exhaled. "All right, let's get you outside, sir," he said to Andrew, lightly gripping his elbow. Andrew resisted, spouting curses about money, betrayal, leaks, and stolen funds. The policeman glanced at me, perplexed. "We'll need statements from everyone." Claire, eyes wild, tried to salvage the moment. "It's a personal matter," she insisted breathlessly. "We'll handle it, I promise. We don't want to press charges." But Officer Pearson shook her head. "It's not up to you, ma'am. Public disturbance, threats, trespassing, these are police matters. Let's step outside." As they escorted Andrew out, Claire lingered, shooting me a desperate look. "Ethan," she whispered, "for the love of God, don't let them arrest him. This will ruin us." I met her gaze with cold resignation. "No, Claire. You ruined us. He's just the final nail in the coffin." She recoiled like I'd slapped her. Before she could reply, an officer nudged her gently toward the door. Outside, the neighbors were gathered at a safe distance, phones in hand, capturing the spectacle. Ava peeked down from the upstairs railing, eyes wide with shock. I nodded at her, letting her know I was okay. Within minutes, the cops loaded Andrew into a squad car. He wouldn't go quietly, still raving about missing money. Claire stood with her arms wrapped around herself, tears streaking her cheeks as she pleaded quietly with the officers to show leniency. It was too late. The damage was done. The patrol cars pulled away, carrying Andrew into the night. Claire stared at me from the sidewalk, a mixture of fury and heartbreak contorting her face. A few neighbors murmured among themselves, whispering speculations about affairs, stolen funds, the meltdown we'd all witnessed. I calmly picked up my phone from the hallway table. The video was still rolling, capturing every word Andrew had spat. I ended the recording, exhaling a long, shaky breath. Claire hovered near the curb, hesitating before she finally got in her car. The engine roared and she sped away, leaving me in the glow of street lamps and lingering stares from curious onlookers. Locking the door behind me, I turned to find Ava standing in the living room. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around my waist, pressing her face against my chest. I could feel her trembling. "He threatened you," she said, voice muffled. "What if he'd hurt you?" I stroked her hair gently. I was ready. Besides, we have him on record now. He basically confessed to everything. This is exactly what we needed. She looked up, a mix of relief and sadness in her eyes. "Dad, is this really how it ends?" I glanced at the battered door and the swirling police lights fading into the night. "This is how it begins," I said quietly. "The real takedown starts now." The morning after Andrew's drunken fiasco, I felt the tension shift from rumor to reality. Word spread quickly. Andrew Hawkins had spent the night in jail for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Local news outlets latched onto his name, linking it to ongoing whispers about financial improprieties at his firm. I half expected Claire to storm into the house with threats or pleas, but she stayed conspicuously absent. Around lunchtime, Ava and I were in the den, examining the video footage from the night before. We'd already emailed a copy to Marcus Reeves, who called me not 10 minutes after he received it. "Ethan," he said, voice hushed, "this is gold. Andrew's rant implicates him in fraud. He mentions missing funds, your wife's involvement. It's basically a confession. I assume you're pressing charges for the trespassing and threats?" I hesitated. "We'll see," I replied. "It might be more useful to let the bigger charges handle him. If the FBI or the company's board gets a hold of this, Andrew will be busy enough. I just want them to use it as evidence." Marcus agreed. "Smart move. I'm meeting with an old contact at the Bureau tomorrow off the record. I'll show them the footage, see if it aligns with their ongoing financial investigation. Meanwhile, keep yourself and Ava safe." I thanked him, hanging up with a swirl of relief and anxiety in my gut. Ava watched me closely. "So the FBI's involved now?" "Looks that way," I said, raking a hand through my hair. "We have to be ready. Andrew might retaliate, and Claire, well, she's tangled up in it too." That afternoon, while Ava was at school, I decided to fortify the house, further double-checking the hidden cameras, ensuring the locks were secure. The sabotage phase was over. Now we braced for the inevitable fallout. Late in the day, a knock at my door startled me. I peered through the peephole, only to find two men in suits. FBI, I guessed, from their official stance and quiet confidence. I opened the door, posture calm. "Can I help you?" One flashed a badge. "Agent Morris, FBI. This is Agent Delgado. We'd like to speak with you about Andrew Hawkins." My heart thudded, but I kept a neutral expression. "Come on in." I led them to the living room, gesturing for them to sit. I figured I'd be hearing from you eventually. Agent Morris sat down, Delgado remaining standing, scanning the space like a hawk. Morris cleared his throat. "We understand you have a recording from last night that might be relevant to an ongoing financial crime investigation." I nodded. "Yeah, it's on my phone. I can send you a copy." He basically shouted about stolen funds, missing money, and threatened me. Delgado chimed in, voice level. "Were you aware of any embezzlement or fraud involving Mr. Hawkins prior to last night?" I weighed my response, remembering Marcus's advice. "I suspected something was off. My wife, Claire Morgan, works as an accountant for Andrew. Recently, I noticed strange behavior, unusual phone calls, after-hours meetings. She admitted to me that Andrew might be moving company money in questionable ways." The agents shared a glance. They didn't look surprised. Morris leaned in. "Do you have any evidence beyond this video?" I hesitated. "Some, but it was obtained privately. I'd prefer my lawyer to handle how that gets turned over. I don't want my teenage daughter dragged into this. She's the one who first noticed the odd transactions on my wife's computer." Delgado's gaze softened. "We understand. Minor children are off limits whenever possible. We just need enough to confirm our probable cause for a broader investigation." "I'll send you the video," I said, pulling out my phone. "You can also talk to my attorney, Marcus Reeves, about any additional documents. He's compiling everything." They nodded. Before leaving, Morris offered a professional but firm smile. "Thanks for your cooperation. If Andrew or anyone else associated with him contacts you, please let us know immediately." When they left, I sank onto the couch, exhaling. The formal wheels were in motion now. If the FBI was confident enough to knock on my door, it meant Andrew's entire operation was on the brink. That evening, I picked Ava up from school, deciding to treat her to a fast food burger, something normal in the midst of our twisted reality. We sat in the car, unwrapping wrappers, the aroma of fries filling the air. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to sound like a regular dad. She shrugged, nibbling on a fry. "Well, some kids asked if my mom is the reason Andrew got arrested. They saw the news." "It's weird. Dad, like everyone's watching us." I reached over and squeezed her shoulder gently. "We'll get through it. Let them talk. Truth is on our side." When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. A figure in the driver's seat glanced up from a phone as we stepped out of the car, then swiftly looked away. My stomach knotted. Was that a detective, or maybe Andrew's private investigator? Tension prickled along my neck. Ava saw it too. Dad, do you think we're being watched? I forced a reassuring smile. Probably just a visitor for the neighbors. But internally, I knew we couldn't rule out intimidation tactics. Inside, I locked the door and guided Ava to the den. She showed me new data gleaned from Claire's emails, some frantic messages about missing funds, and a shadowy list of offshore accounts. We suspected Andrew had siphoned money from those accounts to cover his lifestyle, leaving Claire unaware of exactly how the money was shuffled. I bet she's freaking out now that Andrew's in trouble, Ava murmured. She might realize she's next. My chest tightened. She should. She's complicit, whether or not she understood the scale of his crimes. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We're done for, Ethan. Please help me. Claire. I stared at it, a bitter taste in my mouth. Her pleas for help were too little, too late. Later, I heard from Marcus again. Hey, Ethan. The FBI is actively building charges against Andrew, and I suspect they'll go after Claire, too. The company board found enough suspicious documentation to involve the SEC. This is moving fast. I thanked him, then turned to Ava. We're on the brink, kiddo. By this time tomorrow, Andrew might be facing federal charges, and your mom, she'll be lucky if they only pin the conspiracy on him. If she's not careful, she'll go down for embezzlement, too. Ava's eyes flickered with mixed emotions. She loved her mom once, but heartbreak had turned that love into something distant and pained. What do we do? We let them face the consequences of their choices, I said quietly. We've played our part. Now it's out of our hands. I woke up the next morning to more news. An emergency board meeting had been called. Patricia Hawkins and other executives had apparently confronted Andrew right after he posted bail. He stormed out again, cursing. By noon, cameras swarmed his office building. I watched from home, uneasy relief building in my chest. This was the final blow about to land. The call came from an ecstatic Marcus an hour later. They've done it, he announced. The board has formally contacted the FBI. Andrew's got a warrant out for securities fraud and wire fraud. They're raiding his office as we speak. I closed my eyes. And Claire? Likely being summoned for questioning. If your evidence stands, she's implicated. Unless she can prove she was coerced, she's going down too. I thanked him and hung up, hearing Ava's footsteps behind me. Her face was pale as she read the news popping up on her phone, headlines like prominent CEO charged in massive embezzlement scheme blazing across social media feeds. I gently put a hand on her shoulder. We're here, I said softly. We made it to the final act. Outside, the black SUV was gone. Perhaps they realized intimidation wouldn't help Andrew anymore. The real force's law enforcement had stepped in, and the dominoes were tumbling hard. 2 weeks after Andrew's arrest, the legal process picked up speed. People in high places wanted to see justice done quickly, especially the company's biggest investors, who demanded answers for the missing millions. Andrew's face plastered every local news channel. The trial date was set with surprising urgency, thanks to the overwhelming proof of financial crimes. Ava and I spent those weeks preparing with Marcus. She meticulously organized her digital evidence, the spreadsheets, hidden phone logs, even the transcripts of Claire's and Andrew's calls. Marcus filed motions to keep Ava's identity protected wherever possible. Meanwhile, the tension around town skyrocketed. Rachel's diner was abuzz with rumors of who might testify and what secrets would be spilled in court. Finally, the day arrived. The preliminary hearing for Andrew Hawkins, Claire Morgan, and, to everyone's shock, Edward and Margaret Hudson. Evidence tied them to shady financial transfers through the Hudson Foundation. They'd spent years believing money could hide any sin. Now they were forced to show up in the same courthouse, each trying to distance themselves from the others. I arrived with Ava and Marcus by my side. Outside the courthouse, a swarm of reporters crowded around the steps, cameras flashing. Ava wore a simple blouse and slacks, eyes anxious. Marcus guided us past the press, skillfully dodging questions. I caught snippets like, Colonel Morgan, did you know your wife was part of this? And, do you plan to press charges personally? But I kept my head down, ignoring them. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Marcus led us to a small conference room, where we'd wait until the hearing. Uncle Mike, as Ava sometimes called him, gave us a quick rundown. Andrew's lawyers were trying to pin all blame on Claire. Claire, in turn, hinted Andrew manipulated her, Edward and Margaret's legal team argued they never saw the details of Andrew's transactions. The judge would decide on formal charges after hearing initial evidence. A marshal stepped in, calling us to the courtroom. We filed in, finding seats. Andrew was already there at the defense table, wearing a crisp suit, looking hollow-eyed but defiant. Claire sat a few chairs away, hair pulled back, face pale. Edward and Margaret, stiff as statues, were on another bench. They refused to even glance our way. When the judge entered, the hush was absolute. The hearing began with the prosecution laying out the broad strokes of the case: large-scale embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy, documents bearing Andrew's and Claire's digital signatures, suspicious transactions tied to the Hudson Foundation. Andrew's lead attorney, a sharp-faced man, rose and declared, "My client is the victim of an elaborate scheme perpetrated by Miss Claire Morgan, who exploited her position as lead accountant to redirect funds. He was unaware of her actions." I clenched my jaw. Ava pressed a trembling hand against her mouth. That snake Andrew was flipping the script, playing victim. The prosecution countered by presenting screen captures from Andrew's personal phone logs obtained via a subpoena showing he orchestrated transfers. Still, Andrew refused to budge. Next, Claire's lawyer stood. Miss Morgan was lured into this arrangement under false pretenses. Andrew Hawkins threatened her job, coerced her, and assured her the money was legitimate. She made no personal profit from these accounts. From my seat, I could see Claire's face reddening. Did she realize how flimsy it sounded, claiming ignorance of millions of dollars moving around? The hush was interrupted by Edward's attorney clearing his throat. Edward and Margaret Hudson had no direct knowledge of these fraudulent transfers. If some of that money touched their foundation, it must have been masked as legitimate donations. They were also victims. Behind me, a man muttered, "Victims, my foot." The tension rose, and the judge banged the gavel lightly, restoring order. The prosecution then requested that I, Ethan Morgan, testify about my personal knowledge, particularly the confrontation with Andrew at my house. My pulse spiked, but I stood tall. I took the stand, recounting Andrew's drunken tirade, how he admitted to missing money, how I recorded his statements. The prosecution played the clip for the court. Andrew stared at the floor, jaw clenched. When the cross-examination came, Andrew's lawyer tried to paint me as a jealous husband seeking revenge. "Isn't it true, Colonel Morgan," he sneered, "that you were furious about Mr. Hawkins's relationship with your wife?" A mild wave of anger flared, but I kept my voice even. "Yes, I was furious he slept with my wife and stole from countless people," I said, letting the words ring through the courtroom. A faint murmur rippled among the audience. The lawyer pressed on. "So your motive is personal vengeance, correct?" I shrugged. "My motive is protecting my family from criminals. If that's vengeance, so be it." The judge allowed the line of questioning to continue briefly, but the lawyer got nowhere. The video evidence spoke for itself. Then came Ava's turn. We'd agreed with the prosecution that her testimony would be limited. She took the stand, heart pounding, glancing nervously at me. She described in calm detail how she suspected her mother was complicit in suspicious financial behavior. She explained that she'd seen partial evidence on Claire's computer and overheard phone calls referencing fraudulent accounts. She didn't mention the hacking or the deeper surveillance, just enough to confirm Claire's involvement. Claire sat perfectly still, not meeting Ava's gaze. Andrew watched with narrowed eyes. Edward and Margaret traded tense whispers with their attorneys. By the time Ava finished, half the courtroom looked stunned this teenage girl had uncovered more truth than the grown-ups combined. The judge concluded the day by stating there was sufficient probable cause to bring formal charges against Andrew and Claire for fraud and conspiracy. Edward and Margaret would be charged with potential tax evasion and money laundering. Bail was set high for Andrew. Claire's bail was granted but heavily restricted. She had to surrender her passport and remain under house arrest until trial. Edward and Margaret faced similar constraints, though their lawyers immediately tried to post bail. As we left the courtroom, reporters again clamored for quotes. Andrew was led away by guards, eyes burning with hatred as he glared at me. Claire locked eyes with me once, a silent plea or maybe regret shining there, but I turned away. She had made her choices. Marcus guided Ava and me down a side corridor to avoid the media storm. My chest felt tight. a whirlwind of satisfaction, heartbreak, and relief swirling inside. We'd arrived at the moment where the justice system took over. Our job was mostly done, though the final trial loomed. Outside, as we walked to the car, Ava exhaled shakily. "Dad, I feel like I want to cry, but also like something's finally right." I put an arm around her shoulders. "I get it. This is messy, but it's a start. They can't squirm away now." Just then, Rachel the diner owner appeared from behind a news van. She rushed over, embracing Ava in a motherly hug. "I came to support you too," she said, voice thick with emotion. "Heard it on the radio. How are you holding up?" "We're okay," I muttered, voice hoarse. "Just trying to breathe." Rachel patted my arm. "Justice is slow but steady, Ethan. They won't get away with what they did." I thanked her, noticing Ava blinking back tears. She offered a brave nod. "Yeah, we'll be okay." As we drove off, the courthouse behind us, I couldn't shake the weight of everything. Andrew and Claire's downfall was sealed. Edward and Margaret's illusions of grandeur had cracked wide open. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, faced a criminal trial alongside her lover, all because they chose greed and betrayal over loyalty. And as the dust settled, I knew the next step would be sentencing, closure, and the faint promise of starting over. But first, we had to see this through to the end. The final weeks leading to sentencing felt like living inside a pressure cooker. The formal trial for Andrew, Claire, Edward, and Margaret was swift, fueled by ironclad evidence and a public hungry for a headline about corporate greed. News segments dissected every angle. The flamboyant CEO, the accountant mistress, and her wealthy parents embroiled in a scandal that raked in millions in stolen or laundered funds. Ava and I attended key days of the trial, along with Marcus. Each time we stepped into that courtroom, the tension was palpable. The prosecution hammered Andrew on fraudulent transfers, showing meticulously traced funds that vanished from corporate accounts into offshore banks. Claire's involvement was laid bare. She'd signed off on falsified reports, smoothing out suspicious records. As for Edward and Margaret, they faced damaging evidence of their foundation receiving large, unexplained donations, then funneling that money back into personal ventures. I remember the day the jury returned its verdict vividly. The air in the court seemed to vibrate with collective nerves. Andrew stood expressionless, fists clenched at his sides, while Claire stared at her feet, tears threatening to spill. Edward and Margaret looked pale and exhausted, their once proud confidence battered by weeks of revelations. The foreman's voice rang out, "We, the jury, find the defendants guilty." Count after count, the convictions piled up: fraud, conspiracy, money laundering for Andrew and Claire, tax evasion for Edward and Margaret, a guilty verdict on every key charge. Claire's shoulders sagged. Andrew kept that stony glare, his anger radiating across the aisle. Within days, the sentencing hearing was scheduled. Ava and I stood in the corridor with Marcus, watching the bustle of suits and reporters. We avoided direct eye contact with Claire's side. She'd tried, through her lawyer, to negotiate a lesser sentence by painting herself as Andrew's pawn. But the judge wasn't buying it. The digital evidence painted a different story. The gavel struck. Everyone rose as the judge entered. Andrew and Claire faced the bench first. The prosecutor summarized the devastation they'd caused. Employees losing jobs, shareholders blindsided, entire families shaken by the scandal. Then Andrew's lawyer delivered a last-ditch plea for leniency, citing Andrew's philanthropic gestures and stress. Claire's attorney attempted to cast her as a fragile spouse coerced by a powerful boss. Finally, the judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Hawkins, Mrs. Morgan, you have orchestrated a complex, self-serving scheme that betrayed your company and the public's trust. Your personal relationship is secondary to the deeper crime of embezzling millions and deceiving countless individuals. Accordingly, I sentence you—" My ears rang as the judge continued. "Andrew, 20 years in federal prison plus heavy restitution. Claire, 15 years, also with financial penalties." She let out a choked sob. Andrew stared emptily at the floor. Two bailiffs stepped forward, guiding them away in handcuffs. It was a surreal sight, watching the woman I once loved led off like a common criminal. Next came Edward and Margaret. Their faces were taut, eyes rimmed with the fear of those who never expected to stand before a criminal court. The prosecutor highlighted how their foundation had laundered stolen funds, referencing shell companies and hidden accounts. The judge condemned their arrogance, stating that wealth doesn't place anyone above the law. They each received severe penalties, multiple years of prison time, massive fines, and the dissolution of their precious foundation. Edward's face collapsed, a broken man. Margaret slumped, trembling with shame. The entire room felt stunned by the finality of those sentences. Cameras clicked rapidly, journalists scribbling notes. Ava clutched my hand, her grip trembling. I could feel her pulse racing. She'd just watched her mother, grandparents, and Andrew Hawkins all carted off to a future behind bars. Afterward, outside in the hallway, Marcus guided us to a bench. "It's done," he said quietly. "Justice served." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, it's over." Ava sank onto the bench, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't want Mom to walk free," she whispered. "But it still hurts. She made terrible choices, but—" I squeezed her shoulder gently. "She was your mother before she was a criminal. It's okay to feel hurt." Marcus gave us a moment before saying, "We still have the divorce hearing, Ethan. But after these convictions, it'll be quick. She won't contest anything now." The next week, we went to a smaller family court. Claire, in prison attire, signed the final papers without argument. We didn't speak, just locked eyes once. I glimpsed remorse, or maybe heartbreak, flicker across her face. Then it was done. The divorce finalized, all marital claims severed. I left that courtroom feeling unsteady, as if my entire adult life had just been upended by a few strokes of a pen. Yet a weight also lifted off my chest, the certainty that I was free from her lies. Outside, a subtle breeze rustled the trees lining the courthouse steps. I rubbed my arms, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. Ava waited for me by a planter box. She stepped forward, searching my expression. "So that's it?" I nodded. "We're free. She can't touch us anymore." She looked down at the sidewalk, scuffing her shoe. "I keep thinking about the day you came home from deployment. Everything was so messed up from that moment on. But now—" Her voice caught. I pulled her into a hug. She clung to me for a second, then stepped back, clearing her throat. "We can start over, right?" "Absolutely," I said softly. "We'll leave all this behind. Move if we have to. Rebuild." Marcus approached, holding a slim folder of final documents. "Congratulations, if that's the right word," he said gently. "I know it's bittersweet." "Bittersweet is putting it mildly," I said with a wry smile. "But thanks for your help. Couldn't have done this without you." He clasped my hand. "Anytime, Colonel. Just promise me you'll stay out of trouble from now on." I chuckled, a weary sound. "That's the plan." Driving home, Ava stared out the window, deep in thought. The radio played softly a local news update about Andrew's sentencing, rehashing the biggest scandal our town had seen in decades. I turned it off. We'd lived it. We didn't need the reminder. As we pulled up to the house, I realized it felt emptier than usual, but in a liberating way. The specter of Claire's betrayal no longer haunted every room. It was just me and my daughter, forging a path forward. Late that night, I wandered through the silent house, passing the walls where family photos once hung. I'd taken them down, except for a few that only showed Ava and me. I ended up on the back porch, gazing at the stars. Closing my eyes, I remembered the swirl of emotions from the day I caught Andrew's car in the garage. That memory felt distant now, a different lifetime. Footsteps creaked behind me. Ava appeared, wrapped in a blanket. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Memories," I said simply, nodding at the star-filled sky. She stepped up beside me. "Dad, thank you for everything, for not giving up on me, on us." My throat tightened. "You're my kid. I'd never give up. We lost a lot, but we still have each other." She leaned her head on my shoulder. In that moment, the night air felt fresh, almost like a subtle promise of new beginnings. Claire, Andrew, Edward, Margaret, they all faced the consequences of their twisted greed and betrayal. Our part in their downfall was complete. Standing there under the stars, I let myself imagine a future untainted by secrets. We weren't fully healed, how could we be, after such a painful ordeal? But the path ahead was ours to shape. The war was over. We'd won, at a great cost. And now it was time to start something new, far from the shadows they left behind. The house felt different once the trial was over. Quieter somehow, even though it had never been exactly loud. Claire's presence lingered in the hallways, a fading echo of the life we once had. Each morning I walked through rooms that felt emptier, as if her shadow still clung to the walls. But it wasn't a ghost made of fond memories. It was a reminder of what had shattered. Ava and I decided to sell the place. The mortgage was nearly paid, and I had enough savings left to consider a fresh start. Plus, living here felt like trying to breathe underwater. Every corner held a memory, be it an anniversary dinner or a quiet laugh on a lazy Sunday. I couldn't step into the kitchen without recalling how Claire used to hum while making coffee. The sting of betrayal loomed in every crevice. It was a Thursday afternoon when the realtor came by. Her name was Lisa Jefferson, a petite woman with kind eyes who kept apologizing. "I'm so sorry about everything you two have been through," she murmured, glancing around the living room. "Whenever you're ready, we can start showing the house." Ava stood by my side, arms folded across her chest, watching Lisa with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "We just want it sold," Ava said quietly. "We don't need a bidding war or anything like that." Lisa nodded. "Understood. The market's good right now, so hopefully it won't take long. I'll list it next week." She paused, noticing the bare walls. I'd taken down most of the pictures, didn't want prospective buyers asking about our happy family. After Lisa left, Ava lingered in the living room. "Dad," she asked softly, "do you feel weird letting strangers walk through our house, imagining it as their own?" I dropped onto the couch, letting out a long breath. "Yeah, but I also feel relief," I admitted. "Like once we let this house go, we can finally breathe again." My words hung in the still air. She nodded, fiddling with a loose thread on her sweater. I took down all the photos of Mom and me, too. Didn't want them displayed. Her eyes flicked to a small cardboard box in the corner. Inside, old pictures lay stacked. Birthdays, holidays, random candid moments. Part of me wanted to tear them up and bury the evidence of Claire's place in our lives. Another part couldn't bear to throw away Ava's childhood memories. "We'll keep them," I said gently. "At least for you. Someday you might want to look back, even if it hurts." She gave me a shaky smile. "Maybe." Then, after a beat, she asked, "What about your medals and army stuff? You used to hang them in the den." "I packed them already," I said, nodding at a larger box labeled military memorabilia. "I guess it's time for that corner of my life to be stored for a bit." We spent the rest of the day in a quiet haze of sorting and boxing. Ava found an old photo album from my early deployments overseas. She thumbed through pictures of me in uniform, a younger version of Claire smiling by my side. I watched her expression shift from nostalgia to sadness to a steely resolve that was starting to define her. That evening, after a quick dinner of takeout pizza, I retreated to the master bedroom, now stripped of personal touches. I'd removed Claire's decorative pillows, her vanity mirror, everything that once gave the space a sense of feminine comfort. I could still smell faint traces of her perfume in the closet, a scent that once made me feel safe, now an echo of betrayal. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed, flipping through an old family album I'd tucked away. One photo showed Ava's first day of kindergarten. Claire crouched beside her, beaming. My chest tightened. I reminded myself that Claire's downfall was her own doing, that betrayal was her choice. But grief was complicated. It entwined with anger, forming a twisted knot inside me. Somewhere around midnight, I heard Ava's footsteps padding down the hallway. She peeked in, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Couldn't sleep," she said, hugging a pillow. "Same," I murmured. I patted the floor beside me and she sat, leaning against the bed. We flipped through more photos without speaking, the quiet broken only by our occasional sighs. A shot of Ava's 10th birthday popped up, her riding a new bike while I ran behind, arms outstretched in case she wobbled. Claire stood in the background, clapping. It was a perfect moment, frozen in time, never to be relived. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Ava whispered, surprising me with the question. "Guilty for what?" She shrugged, eyes fixed on the photograph. For hating her, for not missing her the way I used to. I swallowed hard. Sometimes I do, but she made choices that hurt both of us. It's okay to be angry. Ava rested her head on my shoulder. I'm worried that anger is all I'll have left. I set the album aside and turned to her. It won't be, I assured, voice rasping with emotion. Time might not fix everything, but it can heal. We just have to give ourselves room. She nodded, gaze solemn. We stayed there in the quiet father and daughter, each grappling with regrets and hopes. Eventually, she shuffled back to her room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I stared at the shadows on the walls, wondering how many more nights I'd spend wrestling with the past in this house. Come sunrise, I rose from the floor, stiff and sore, but determined. The real estate sign was going up next week. We'd start fresh, find a new place, carve out a space free from betrayal's echo. I just had to endure the in-between, a final stretch of living with the ghosts of what was, until we could step into what might be. Outside, the first rays of dawn colored the sky with pale orange. I pressed my palm against the cool window, exhaling a shaky breath. Sometimes rebuilding looks like empty rooms and sealed boxes. Sometimes it feels like raw heartbreak. But at least it was honest now, no more illusions. A slight breeze stirred the for-sale flyers Lisa had left on the kitchen counter. Each rustle reminded me of the changes barreling toward us. And in that strangely comforting hush, I realized an empty house might be heavy with memories, but it was also a blank slate. A chance to start anew. The day the for sale sign went up on our front lawn, I stood there in the driveway, phone in hand, searching through potential new locations. We hadn't decided exactly where to move, but we knew it had to be away from the prying eyes of neighbors who still whispered about the scandal. Ava joined me, sipping from a paper cup of coffee she'd taken to drinking it black, just like me, though I suspected she didn't love the taste. Look at this place, I said, pulling up an online listing for a small rental home in another county. It's near some decent schools, not fancy, but quiet. Ava peered at the pictures on my screen. Better than here, she said with a wry half-smile. But do you think it's too rural? I still want to do extracurriculars, maybe an ROTC program if they have it. That's the plan, I said softly, turning to face her. I want you to have every opportunity. No more skeletons lurking in the closet. She nodded, a flicker of determination passing over her features. And you, Dad? You can't just be in limbo forever. I let out a breath, glancing at the battered mailbox where Andrew once nearly crashed his car. So many bad memories cluttered this street. Yeah, I'm looking for something new too. Maybe a security consulting gig. Marcus said he'd keep an ear out for open positions. She nodded. A silence fell, not entirely uncomfortable. In the distance, a passing car slowed, the driver blatantly staring at us before driving on. Gossip was still fresh. By mid-afternoon, we were back inside, tackling a new wave of packing. I taped up the last of the boxes labeled living room. Ava started on the attic, rummaging through dusty boxes that we'd barely touched in years. Occasionally, she'd call down, "Hey, Dad, do we need to keep these old curtains? Or did you even know we had a spare coffee maker?" Midway through, I heard her footsteps clunk down the attic ladder. She emerged, hair slightly mussed, holding a small cedar box. "This was shoved in a corner under a bunch of junk," she said, voice unsure. "It has your name on it." I recognized it instantly. Claire had given it to me for our 10th wedding anniversary. Inside, we used to store mementos tickets from our first movie date, the napkin from the cafe where I proposed. My chest tightened. "I thought I threw that out," I murmured. Ava set it carefully on the kitchen table. "Do you want me to open it, or—" "No," I said softly. "I'll handle it." She touched my arm in silent support, then retreated to the living room. For a long moment, I stared at the box, my mind swirling with memories. Finally, I steeled myself and opened it. The contents were fewer than I recalled, a short stack of photos from the early days, my old dog tags from the time Claire wore them on a chain for luck, and a handwritten note. The note read, "Ethan, thank you for giving me the best years of my life. Here's to many more. Love, Claire." It felt like a punch to the gut, the neat handwriting, the affectionate tone all lies now. Or maybe it had been true once upon a time. Rage fluttered in my belly, mixed with a grief that refused to let go. After a long beat, I folded the note, placed it in the trash bin under the sink, and snapped the lid shut. The dog tags, though, I kept. They were part of me before they ever touched Claire's hands. Later, after dinner, Ava and I sat at the dining table, now stripped of decorations, just a plain wooden surface covered in scattered papers about new schools, new jobs, new futures. She traced her finger along a brochure for a military academy summer program. "Dad," she began, a slight tremble in her voice, "I've been thinking about applying here. I know it's intense, but I want discipline, structure. I guess I need a way to prove to myself I'm not broken." My throat tightened at her honesty. "You're not broken," I said firmly. "But if that's what you want, I support you. We can figure out the logistics, the tuition, whatever it takes." A flicker of gratitude lit her eyes. "Thank you." And that was the moment I realized how grown-up she'd become. Claire's betrayal forced her to grow faster, to see the world's ugliness too soon. I hated that it happened, but I couldn't deny it forged a certain resilience in her. Before bed, we had a final round of conversation in the living room, lit by a single lamp since we'd packed everything else. We talked about the house's sale prospects. Lisa had found a couple of interested buyers. We talked about whether to store or donate the old couch. We even talked about Rachel from the diner, who insisted on throwing us a farewell gathering. The normalcy of it all felt surreal, as if we were rewriting the script of our lives line by line. At one point, Ava turned to me, face unreadable. "Dad, do you think we'll ever, talk to Mom again? Like, if she gets out someday?" The question slammed into me like a rogue wave. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me doesn't want to, but she's your mother. If you decide to see her, I'll stand by you." She nodded, expression conflicted. "Thanks. I'm not sure what I'll do yet." In that quiet moment, I made a promise to myself and to her, to be the stable presence she needed, free from secrets or compromises. The old me had left for Afghanistan believing Claire would hold our family together. Now I was back for good, and it was my turn to ensure Ava never doubted her place in the world. When we finally turned out the lights, the house felt echoey. But that emptiness was no longer suffocating. It was a canvas for a future free of deception. As I climbed the stairs, each step felt like a vow to protect her, to protect us. That was my father's promise. No more illusions, no more half-truths. We'd face whatever came next with clear eyes and unshakable resolve. A few days later, Lisa the realtor called with good news. She had an offer on the house from a young couple eager to settle in the neighborhood. They weren't spooked by the scandal, apparently. They loved the property's big backyard and didn't mind a bit of local gossip. I hung up the phone, exhaling relief. "Looks like we're finally on our way out," I told Ava. That same afternoon, I dropped by Rachel's diner to pick up lunch. The bell over the door jingled, and Rachel's familiar grin greeted me from behind the counter. "Heard you got an offer," she said, sliding over 2 Togo bags. "Congrats, Ethan." "Thanks," I replied, leaning on the counter. "Feels surreal. I didn't think it'd happen so fast." She patted my hand gently. "Some folks in town were worried the scandal would scare buyers away. But you deserve a break, Colonel." Her use of my old title was comforting, a reminder that once upon a time I was simply a soldier, not a man trapped in a personal war. I nodded, taking a moment to glance around the diner. The red vinyl booths still had that faint smell of coffee and warm bread. This place had been a refuge for me and Ava, a corner of normalcy in the middle of chaos. "Thank you for everything, Rachel. Seriously, you've been kind." She waved a hand dismissively. "Just doing what I can. And hey," her eyes twinkled, "I'm planning a little farewell thing for you and Ava. Nothing fancy, just some close friends who want to say goodbye properly." I hesitated, not wanting a big fuss. But then I imagined Ava's face, the sense of belonging that might bring her. "Okay," I agreed softly. "That'd be nice. Let me know the details." That evening, Ava and I returned to the diner, as Rachel suggested, for an early dinner. We walked in to find a small group of familiar faces gathered in the back corner. Marcus Reeves, a couple of my old army buddies who lived nearby, the neighbor who once helped me with yard work, and a handful of others. They clapped softly as we approached, an understated welcome that made Ava blush. Rachel stepped forward, arms wide. Surprise, but, well, not really, she laughed. We just wanted to show our support. She led us to a corner booth decorated with a modest banner reading, "Good luck, Ethan and Ava." Ava's eyes shone. "This is wow," she whispered, voice trembling. "Thank you, everyone." For the next hour, we traded stories, some serious, others lighthearted. Marcus recounted the day I first brought him the evidence against Andrew, how he knew our case was rock solid. My army friends teased me about the time I got lost on base as a fresh recruit, though they left out the gloomier war stories for Ava's sake. Rachel served steaming plates of comfort food, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, warm rolls. I realized it was the first time in a long while that Ava and I genuinely relaxed in a social setting, unburdened by fear of secrets unraveling. At one point, as I sipped sweet tea, I caught Ava laughing with one of my army buddies. She looked so young, so alive, like the darkness of the past months hadn't completely swallowed her spirit. A flicker of hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe we could do this. Maybe we could outrun the shadows. When the meal wrapped up, Rachel rose from her seat, clearing her throat. "All right, everyone. I just want to say a few words." She smiled kindly at me and Ava. "Ethan, I've known you since before you shipped out that first time. You were always dependable, honest. Life threw you a massive curveball, but you didn't buckle. And Ava," she turned to my daughter, "you've grown into such a strong young lady. I admire your guts." Ava blinked back tears, and I patted her hand under the table. Rachel continued, "Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need. Don't forget us here, okay?" A wave of applause fluttered through the small group. Ava stood, cheeks flushed, and managed a shaky "thank you," her gaze sweeping over them all. Then she sank back down, biting her lip, overwhelmed but happy. I tried to speak too, but the words caught in my throat. How do you thank people for being your anchor when your world crumbles? After we said our goodbyes and headed out, the summer evening air felt warm against my skin. Stars began to peek out overhead. We walked to the car in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Before we got in, Ava turned to me, eyes brimming with emotion. "Dad, I'm so grateful. Not just to them, but for how you stuck by me through everything." I pulled her into a one-armed hug. "I'm proud of you, kiddo. You showed me what real courage looks like." We drove home in a peaceful hush. The house felt less suffocating somehow, maybe because I knew our days here were numbered. Boxes lined the hallway, labeled carefully. A few photos from the farewell dinner I snapped on my phone would become new memories to hang on a future wall. As I sat down to finalize some paperwork for Lisa the realtor, I noticed Ava rummaging through a small stack of school brochures. She'd circled the contact info for the Naval Academy's summer program. My heart swelled at her ambition. This was the glimpse of hope we both needed. A future shaped by our own choices, not by Claire's betrayal. Tomorrow we'd keep packing, keep sorting. And soon enough, the couple who put in the offer would walk through, imagining their own lives in these rooms. Let them fill the house with fresh laughter and untainted memories. We were leaving behind the darkness, the gossip, the heartbreak. The sadness wouldn't vanish overnight, but the path before us was starting to glow with promise. At bedtime, I paused outside Ava's room, the door slightly ajar. She was sprawled on her bed, reading an article on preparing for military academy admissions. She looked focused, that fierce determination etched into her features, my little soldier. I smiled softly, shutting my own bedroom door. For the first time in a long while, I drifted to sleep without the usual knot of anxiety. The farewell dinner at Rachel's had reminded me that despite the betrayal and the storm we weathered, we weren't alone. People cared. And more importantly, we cared about each other enough to rebuild from the rubble. We signed the closing papers on a warm Tuesday afternoon. Lisa appeared at our doorstep with a friendly grin, carrying a folder of documents that signaled the official end of our chapter here. Ava watched from the kitchen table, swirling a soda can in her hands while I initialed and signed stacks of papers. Every stroke of the pen felt like releasing one more tether to the past. When it was done, Lisa shook my hand. "Congratulations, Ethan. The new owners move in next week. I assume you'll be gone by then?" I nodded. "Yeah, I want to be on the road soon. Thanks for all your help." She gave Ava a small smile. "Good luck, sweetheart. I hope your new place treats you well." Ava managed a polite thank you, then stared at the swirl of dust motes dancing in the sunlight once Lisa left. "So that's it? The house is officially sold?" I stepped over to her, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "It's done. We've got until the end of the week to clear out." 2 days later, we found ourselves standing in the no-empty living room. The floors were bare, the walls stripped of photos. A faint echo answered every footstep, as if the house itself was saying goodbye. A single lamp stood in the corner, the last piece of furniture waiting to be loaded into the truck. Ava cleared her throat. "Feels less sad than I expected." I nodded. Sometimes letting go can be freeing. I glanced around, recalling all the illusions we'd unknowingly lived under. Now, every secret, every lie, had been dragged into the light and swept away. One final night in the house passed quietly. We'd moved our mattresses into the living room so we could pack everything else. It felt like a makeshift sleepover. Father and daughter curled up in sleeping bags, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. Ava fell asleep first, her breathing soft. I stayed awake longer, staring at the dark ceiling, remembering the day I first carried her into this house as a newborn. Back then, I'd believed we'd fill these rooms with years of happiness. Life had other plans. Morning dawned softly, golden sunlight streaming through windows once covered by Claire's carefully chosen drapes. Now the windows were bare, no illusions left. I brewed coffee in a travel kettle, and Ava rummaged through an ice chest for bottled water. We shared a quick breakfast, then loaded the last few boxes into the back of my pickup truck, along with her suitcase. Outside, the neighborhood was stirring to life. A few folks from across the street waved politely. I wondered if they knew we were leaving for good, or if they just assumed we were running errands. I caught a glimpse of Mr. Jensen, the old man who'd seen Andrew's meltdown. He lifted his coffee mug in silent farewell, his expression somewhere between pity and respect. I took a final walk through the house, checking every closet, every drawer, making sure we hadn't forgotten anything. Stopped by the master bedroom empty except for dust bunnies in the corners. Let my hand linger on the windowsill where Claire once kept a row of potted herbs, long since thrown away. A pang of bitterness flickered, but I pushed it aside. In the hallway, I passed the spot where Ava once taped up pictures of her favorite band. She peeled them off weeks ago, leaving faint outlines on the paint. Ghosts. I whispered a final goodbye to them. We didn't need ghosts anymore. At last, we stood on the front porch. Ava locked the door, then turned to me. "Ready?" she asked softly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah, let's do this." We climbed into my truck, the engine rumbling beneath us. For a heartbeat, I just sat there, gazing at the house in the rearview mirror. That battered old mailbox, the porch steps where I'd welcomed Claire home from countless errands, the front window I'd peered through after returning from deployment, only to discover my life had crumbled behind it. All of it receded like a memory I was done replaying. I shifted into drive. As we pulled away, I felt the tension in my shoulders unwind, replaced by a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Ava, riding shotgun, stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a firm line. Neither of us spoke until we'd turned onto the main road, heading out of the neighborhood. Then she exhaled. "Dad?" "Yeah?" I glanced over, the sunlight highlighting the determination in her face. "We're really free," she whispered. "Aren't we?" I squeezed the steering wheel. "Yeah, kiddo, we are." A faint smile curved her lips. "Good." She turned on the radio, a mellow track playing at low volume. We let the music fill the cab, the miles rolling by under our tires. We didn't have an exact destination locked down yet, just a rough sense of direction and a short-term rental lined up outside the city. I told Ava we could keep driving until we found a place that felt right. We had each other, that was all that mattered. The dust of the past was settling behind us. As we merged onto the highway, the sign read, "Thank you for visiting our town." Ava twisted in her seat to glance out the back window, taking a final look at the place that held her entire life up until now. Then she faced forward again. In that moment, the slow-motion film of our recent months seemed to speed up. I pictured the betrayals, the heartbreak, the courtroom. I remembered Andrew's sneer, Claire's tears, Edward and Margaret's arrogance. All of it felt distant, like we were flipping the page on a dark chapter. "Dad," Ava said softly, not looking my way, "thank you for not giving up." My throat constricted. "Never," I said. "I promised you that." She nodded, turning her gaze to the horizon. The highway stretched out before us, endless possibilities waiting. The hum of the engine lulled me into a calm I hadn't felt in ages. We might still wrestle with nightmares or regrets or anger, but we were doing it on our own terms, forging a path forward without the weight of secrets. And that, I thought, was how real freedom felt. Not an explosion of fireworks, but a quiet release of the breath you'd been holding for too long. With the old house behind us, we were finally free to discover who we were, father and daughter, survivors of betrayal, forging a new beginning out of the wreckage. I glanced at Ava, saw the hint of a hopeful grin tugging at her lips, and let myself smile back, just a little. The road ahead seemed open and clear, and for the first time in a very long time, I believed we could find peace. I didn't fully appreciate the term new beginnings until Ava and I rolled into Stonebridge. It was a smallish town, nestled between gentle hills and a winding river. The day we arrived, pale sunlight filtered through the haze, giving the place a drowsy, late-summer glow. I followed directions to our rental home, a modest 3-bedroom bungalow on a quiet street. No one stared as we drove in. No murmured gossip, just neighbors tending lawns or washing cars, casting polite, neutral glances. We parked at the curb. Ava hopped out first, stretching her arms overhead. The long drive had left us stiff, but also brimming with possibility. "So this is it?" she asked, taking in the bungalow's faded blue siding and a small front porch with peeling white paint. "Home sweet home for now," I replied. We wouldn't be here permanently if we found something better, but this was a decent landing spot while Ava finished high school. A sign reading "For Rent" still leaned against the mailbox. I'd already mailed the security deposit weeks earlier, so all that was left was meeting the landlord and settling in. A gentle breeze ruffled the tall oak tree in the yard. I caught a faint whiff of honeysuckle from somewhere nearby. The air felt fresh, untainted by old memories. If we were lucky, Stonebridge might offer exactly what we needed: anonymity and a calm environment where Ava could flourish. Inside, the house was unfurnished except for a few basic appliances. Hard floors squeaked under our footsteps as we explored. Ava set down her backpack in the smaller bedroom with a single window facing the backyard. "This is cozy," she said, her tone uncertain but hopeful. I nodded, peering at the living room. It had good light from 2 large windows, plus a side door leading to a small deck. "We'll need a couch, maybe a couple chairs," I muttered. We'd sold or donated a lot of our old furniture, too weighed down by memories. A fresh start meant we were basically building from scratch. We were mid-inspection when we heard a knock at the door. I exchanged a curious glance with Ava before opening it. A short, sandy-haired man stood outside, wearing a friendly smile. "Hi there," he greeted, offering a handshake. "I'm Will Brooks, your landlord. Wanted to welcome you both to Stonebridge." His handshake was firm but warm. "Ethan Morgan," I said. "This is my daughter, Ava." Will nodded politely at her. "I left a spare set of keys in the kitchen drawer and a binder with local info, trash pickup days, recommended repair folks, that kind of thing." He glanced around the living room, noticing how empty it was. "Need any help finding affordable furniture? My sister runs a consignment store in town." I smiled. "Might take you up on that. Thanks." He gave Ava a small wave. "There's a decent high school about 10 minutes from here. I'm sure you'll settle in quick. People here are friendly if you give them a chance." Ava mustered a tentative smile. "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it." After Will left, we took a moment to breathe, a mixture of relief and nerves swirling. So far, Stonebridge lived up to its reputation. Laid back, unassuming, not a single soul aware of our past. That evening, after grabbing takeout burgers, we settled onto a pair of fold-out chairs in the empty living room. The overhead light cast long shadows on the bare walls, a reminder of how new everything was. "Dad, do you think it'll stay this peaceful?" Ava asked, unwrapping her burger. "You know, no drama?" I leaned back, sipping from a soda cup. "I can't predict the future, but I sure hope so. People move on, especially in a place like this." She nodded, scanning the room. "I can't believe we're basically starting from zero. No couches, no TV, no pictures on the walls. That's the beauty of it," I said with a small smile. "We get to decide what goes up there from now on." A quiet fell between us, comfortable but reflective. I caught the faint flicker of streetlights through the window. Night in Stonebridge was softer, the sky free of glaring city glow. It reminded me of quiet nights on base, except here I didn't have to worry about mortar rounds or betrayal creeping through my walls. Over the next few days, we settled into a routine. By morning, we'd scour local thrift shops for second-hand furniture. By afternoon, we'd rummage for groceries, figuring out which store had the best produce. We discovered a small cafe on Main Street with fresh pastries. The smell of cinnamon and coffee teased us in off the sidewalk, and the middle-aged barista, Lucy, welcomed us with a cheery, "Morning, folks haven't seen you around before." Ava quickly found a hidden gem in the form of a used bookstore near the cafe, spending hours flipping through classics or browsing college guides. Sometimes I felt a pang of guilt for not giving her the normal high school experience. But I reminded myself she'd get a chance to integrate soon enough, once we got her enrolled. Midweek, we visited Stonebridge High for registration. A kindly guidance counselor, Miss Alvarez, showed us around. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and teenage energy lockers slamming, bright posters for upcoming events. Ava looked both excited and wary. Miss Alvarez pointed out the advanced placement classes and an ROTC program. "We have a small but dedicated group," she said, noticing Ava's interest. Ava's eyes lit up. "That's perfect," she murmured. Later, in the car, she admitted, "I'm thinking I'll join ROTC right away. Gotta get on track if I want to head to a military academy." A swell of pride warmed my chest. "I think that's a great idea. You do what feels right." At home that evening, as we lugged a second-hand sofa into the living room, our neighbor from across the street ambled over. She was an older woman with silver hair and a neat bun, introducing herself as Eloise Martin. "Need a hand?" she joked, though her frail frame said otherwise. We let her chat a bit, learned she'd lived on the street for 20 years. "It's a friendly neighborhood," she assured, eyeing the sofa. "Welcome to Stonebridge, sweeties. Don't hesitate if you need sugar or a listening ear." Ava offered her a shy grin. "Thank you, Miss Martin. I'm Ava. This is my dad." Miss Martin gave me a warm nod. "Good to have you both. Don't let the hush fool you. Stonebridge can be lively when it wants to." After she left, Ava and I collapsed onto our newly acquired couch, letting out identical huffs of exhaustion. The day's labors had our muscles aching, but there was a sense of satisfaction in building this new life from the ground up. That night I stood on the front porch, listening to the crickets sing and the distant rumble of a passing truck. My phone buzzed a message from Marcus Reeves checking on us, making sure we were settling in okay. I typed a quick reply. "All good here. Thanks again for your help." Then I shoved the phone in my pocket, gazing at the quiet street. Stonebridge felt right. There were no ghosts in these walls, no old neighbors gossiping about my wife or the scandal. Just a handful of decent people going about their lives, giving us space. For the first time in a long while, I inhaled deeply and felt no tightness in my chest, no lurking dread. Ava from behind me stepped onto the porch in her pajamas, still wearing that expression of quiet wonder. "Dad, I think I might actually like it here," she whispered. I draped an arm around her shoulders, the warmth of fatherly pride sparking in my heart. "Me too, kiddo," I whispered back. The stars overhead seemed brighter than I remembered, unspoiled by city glare. This was the open sky of a new chapter, no clouds of betrayal, no storm of regrets. I closed my eyes, letting the calm settle in my bones. We had a ways to go, plenty of scars to work through, but for now, Stonebridge gave us a chance to start again, one slow breath at a time. Adjusting to Stonebridge life proved both comforting and challenging. On the one hand, no one pried into our past and the town's slow pace felt like a balm. On the other, Ava and I each struggled with our own lingering burdens, mine from years of deployment and a catastrophic betrayal, hers from losing the mother she once adored. Within a week, Ava started at Stonebridge High. She wanted to dive right into the junior ROTC program, so we met with Master Sergeant Rivera, a stern but kind instructor who introduced her to the routine. Ava came home that first day, glowing with a mix of nerves and excitement. "Dad, they run drills before school twice a week," she informed me, shoving a schedule into my hands. "I have to be up by 5:30. I grinned. "That's no problem. I used to run patrols at 0400. I'll make sure you're awake." She gave a dramatic eye roll, but I saw the faint smile. "You're not allowed to do the drill with me, though. Teenage embarrassment code." We settled into a new morning rhythm, me nudging Ava awake at dawn, her grumbling half-heartedly before suiting up in the ROTC uniform. I'd drive her to school, then head to a local cafe or the library, job hunting or browsing resources on security consulting. Some days, I'd walk Stonebridge's quiet streets, reacquainting myself with the feeling of normal civilian life, no need to watch my back, no crowds whispering about my business. One Monday, I found a flyer posted on the community board at Lucy's Cafe. "Looking for security advisor, Caldwell Industries." The name rang a faint bell. Caldwell ran a small manufacturing plant on the outskirts of Stonebridge. I jotted down the contact info, and after a little online digging, discovered they needed someone to revamp their on-site security protocols. Might be the perfect fit for my military background. That same afternoon, I shot them an email, attaching my resume. Meanwhile, Ava's days were packed with classes, homework, and ROTC. I noticed she carried the weight of our past in subtle ways. Sometimes I'd catch her scanning the hall around her, like she expected rumors to pounce. But Stonebridge High wasn't like that. She mentioned meeting a few friendly classmates, including a girl named Hallie who shared her interest in science. They studied together for a biology quiz, apparently forming a bond over lab experiments and a mutual hatred of dissecting frogs. At home, nights were quieter. We'd cook simple meals, spaghetti, chicken stir-fry, exchanging stories of our day. I'd share tidbits from my job hunt. She'd talk about Master Sergeant Rivera's demanding drills. Sometimes in those small moments, my heart swelled with relief that we had normal father-daughter chatter again, not overshadowed by secrets or fear. But not all was perfect. Some nights, nightmares seeped into my dreams, flashbacks of firefights overseas blending with Claire's betrayal. I'd wake drenched in sweat, pulse hammering. Once Ava came rushing in, alarmed by my muffled shouts. Embarrassed, I brushed it off. She gave me a sympathetic look that said, "I'm here if you need me." Another time, I caught her sitting on the porch at midnight, staring at the stars with a tight expression. When I asked what was wrong, she just whispered, "Sometimes I remember the day you came home, how everything changed." We didn't elaborate. The past was still raw, even in a new place. Still, Stonebridge's supportive vibe helped more than I expected. Miss Alvarez, the school counselor, kept an open door for Ava, encouraging her to talk about any issues. Miss Martin, our neighbor, would wave from across the street, occasionally bringing over a plate of homemade cookies to fatten Ava up, as she put it. Will Brooks, our landlord, swung by with paint samples if we ever wanted to freshen the walls. I politely declined, didn't want to invest too heavily in a rental, but it was nice to see folks reaching out. After 2 weeks, Caldwell Industries responded to my application. Their HR manager, a cheerful woman named Dinah, invited me for an interview. I borrowed a corner in Lucy's Cafe to prepare, going over likely questions about risk assessment and site security. My mind raced with nerves I hadn't felt since my military exit interview. It was one thing to navigate war zones or personal crises, but job interviews always had a unique stress. The day of the interview, I pulled on a crisp button-down and headed to the Caldwell plant. The facility was modest, long metal building set behind a chain-link fence. Inside, I met with the operations manager, a gruff man named Jeff Cunningham, who eyed me with curiosity. "You've got quite the background, Colonel," he said, scanning my resume. "Combat tours, high-level clearance. Why settle in a place like Stonebridge?" I told him the truth. I needed a stable environment to focus on family, and I had a knack for security oversight. I can help you with anything from staff training to evaluating perimeter vulnerabilities, I added. My approach is collaborative, not heavy-handed. He grunted, stroking his chin. We've had a few break-ins around here in the past year, petty theft mostly, but the owners want a tighter ship. You'd report to me, build a small team. Think you can handle that? I mustered a confident nod. Yes, sir, I believe so. He cracked a hint of a smile. I like straightforward. We'll let you know soon. I left feeling cautiously optimistic. On the drive home, the late afternoon sun cast golden rays across farmland and rolling hills. In the back of my mind, I pictured the father I once was, scouring job boards with a sinking sense that I was failing my family. Now, forging a new path with Ava felt like redemption, even if I had no illusions about how tough the road still was. That evening, Ava plopped into the living room after finishing homework, looking exhausted but proud. Guess who aced her first ROTC leadership test, she announced, a spark in her eyes. I high-fived her, a genuine grin lighting my face. Nice job, cadet. I'm proud of you. She flopped onto our second-hand couch. All those experiences, everything we went through, it's like it fuels me. I want to prove that I can handle anything. I settled beside her, ignoring the faint squeak of the couch springs. You already have, I murmured, voice tight with emotion. Everything else is just a bonus. A comfortable silence enveloped us, the only sound the soft hum of our old fridge and distant traffic. Outside, the street lamp flickered on. In that hush, I realized how far we'd come, from a house of lies and heartbreak to a place where father and daughter could find quiet pride in everyday achievements. Before bed, I checked my email. A notification from Caldwell Industries made my heart skip. They were offering me the position. Base salary wasn't huge, but enough to keep us afloat and maybe sock away money for Ava's eventual academy plans. I stood there in the glow of my phone, a swirl of relief and excitement building. It wasn't the glamorous job I once held as an Army officer, but it was honest work that used my skill set. And it was right here in Stonebridge, the quiet town that gave us a second chance. Ava's door was shut. She'd likely turned in early. I decided to tell her in the morning. For now, I let the feeling sink in. We were forging new paths side by side. Neither of us had it all figured out, but we were stepping forward day by day, forging a life free of the shadows that once loomed over us. I sank onto my bed, letting exhaustion claim me, a faint smile lingering on my face as I drifted off. Maybe, just maybe, we were exactly where we needed to be. Settling into a stable routine was easier than I'd dared to hope. My new job at Caldwell Industries began smoothly. Jeff Cunningham introduced me to the small security team, who quickly accepted my expertise. Days turned into a steady rhythm of site walkthroughs, staff training sessions, and the occasional mild crisis, like resetting a broken lock or investigating an after-hours alarm. Ava, meanwhile, was juggling honors classes, ROTC commitments, and a budding social life. She'd sometimes invite Hallie or other classmates over to study, their laughter drifting through the living room. I'd keep a respectful distance, occasionally offering snacks or a friendly hello. It was good to see Ava forging friendships without the weight of her old reputation trailing behind. But as the weeks passed, the sense of calm was disrupted by an unexpected jolt. A letter arrived one Saturday morning, the return address listing a federal prison. My pulse pounded the second I spotted Claire's name scrawled on the envelope. I froze in the doorway, mail in hand. Ava was in the backyard, practicing some ROTC drill with a lightweight practice rifle, so she didn't notice my reaction. Stepping inside, I set the rest of the mail on the kitchen counter and turned the envelope over. My mind churned with conflicting emotions: anger, dread, a flicker of curiosity. Claire was behind bars. Did she expect sympathy from me now? Quietly, I retreated to my bedroom, letter in hand. I knew Ava would demand to read it if she found out. But would that help her heal or just reopen wounds? My heart twisted. I sank onto the edge of my bed, carefully tearing open the envelope. Claire's handwriting filled a single sheet of lined paper. Ethan, I'm sure this is the last thing you want, but I need to say some things I couldn't before. Prison has a way of stripping illusions. I won't ask for forgiveness. I know what I did. I made choices that destroyed our family. Andrew manipulated me, but I let him. I thought I deserved better than the life we had. I was a fool. You've probably moved on, and you should. But I beg you don't let Ava believe I never loved her. She was my whole world once. Please tell her I'm sorry. If she writes me, I'll do whatever it takes to make amends, if that's even possible. I don't expect a reply, but I had to try. Claire. My stomach clenched. The words didn't absolve her crimes or the pain she'd caused, but they carried a certain rawness. Would Ava want to read this? She'd grown so strong in Stonebridge, carving a life free of Claire's shadow. A part of me wanted to rip the letter to shreds. Another part recognized that Ava had the right to decide. I folded the paper and tucked it away in a drawer. That afternoon, I acted normal, helping Ava with laundry, discussing which local hiking trails we might explore on Sunday. She sensed my distraction and asked, "Everything okay?" I forced a nod, feeling like a traitor to honesty. "Just job stuff on my mind," I lied. She didn't press, and guilt gnawed at me. For now, I wasn't ready to disrupt her calm. Maybe I'd show her the letter later, maybe not. Days slipped by. Each time I considered handing Ava the letter, I pictured the heartbreak in her eyes, the months it took to rebuild her sense of self. My paternal instinct roared at me to shield her from further pain. I kept the letter hidden. But secrets, even well-meant, have a way of surfacing. One evening, Ava rummaged through my drawer looking for spare batteries, an old habit of ours, and she found the folded paper. I walked in just as she was unfolding it. Our gazes locked. She swallowed. "Dad, what is this?" Her voice trembled, half upset, half confused. I hesitated, cursing my lack of foresight. "I was going to tell you," I started awkwardly. "Claire wrote to me from prison. I didn't know if showing you would help or hurt, so I held off." She inhaled slowly, eyes flicking to the letter. "Can I read it?" My throat felt tight. "Of course." I stepped back, letting her pass. She perched on the edge of my bed, scanning Claire's words in silence. I watched her expression shift anger, sadness, maybe a small flicker of longing. When she finished, she closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling shakily. "She says she's sorry. She says Andrew manipulated her, but she's not blaming him entirely." Ava's voice was subdued. I sat next to her, leaving a respectful gap. "How do you feel?" She stared at the letter. "Confused. I hate what she did, but part of me—" Her words trailed off as tears welled. "Part of me misses the mom I had when I was little before all this." I rested a tentative hand on her shoulder. "Missing that doesn't make you weak. She was your mother, and you loved her." She wiped her cheek, letting the letter flutter to her lap. "I'm not sure if I want to write her back. Does that make me cold?" "Not at all." My voice was firm. "You're allowed to decide what's best for you. If writing helps you heal, do it. If ignoring her is what you need, that's okay too." She let out a shaky breath. "I might think about it. She's paying the price, locked up. I guess I can't ignore that once upon a time she cared." Leaning forward, I took her hands. "Listen, Ava, you've come so far. Whatever choice you make, I support you." She nodded, tears threatening to spill over again. Carefully, she folded the letter and tucked it back in the envelope. "For now, I'm not ready, but I'll keep it if that's okay." I squeezed her hand. "Of course." In the weeks that followed, the letter lay in Ava's desk drawer, a quiet reminder of Claire's existence. Occasionally, Ava would glance at it, frowning. I could tell it weighed on her, but she also continued forging ahead, focusing on ROTC competitions, hanging out with Hallie, joking about how the local diner's milkshakes were a poor imitation of Rachel's back home. One day, she confided in me. "I'm not writing her yet," she said, voice resolute. "Maybe someday. I just need to live my life without her shadow." I understood completely. Claire might have regrets, might even mean her apology, but that didn't erase the pain or the betrayal. The best gift I could give Ava was the freedom to choose when or if to open that door. Still, the letter's existence cast a faint tension over our otherwise steady climb forward. Stonebridge was good for us, but the past was never fully erased. It lingered in the corners of our hearts. I stayed vigilant for any sign that Ava was spiraling or that I was lapsing into old bitterness. We each had scars, but we also had a future bright enough to overshadow them. Then, too, there was the creeping sense that closure might require facing Claire's words head-on. For now, though, we held the line. We'd found some measure of peace in Stonebridge, and neither of us was eager to let Claire's sorrowful remorse undermine that fragile balance. Perhaps real closure would come in time once Ava felt strong enough to engage. Until then, the letter remained in her desk, a silent testament to the family we used to be. Time in Stonebridge had a fluid, gentle quality. Weeks melted into months, each day layering new memories over the old scars. I soon fell into a comfortable groove at Caldwell Industries leading security drills, updating protocols, even networking with local law enforcement to coordinate emergency plans. The monotony of stable work felt almost luxurious after the chaos I'd weathered. Ava blossomed in her own right. She threw herself into ROTC with fierce dedication, earning leadership roles and impressing Master Sergeant Rivera. Her academic performance soared, 2 advanced placement classes, science fairs, even a short volunteer stint tutoring younger students. Stonebridge High seemed to appreciate her determination, never probing too deeply into her past. She had friends, weekend study groups, and glimpses of a normal teenage life. About a year in, Ava decided to apply formally to the Naval Academy, as well as a few other military colleges. She spent hours perfecting her application essays, detailing her leadership experiences, her resilience through adversity, though she never named the specifics of what we'd endured. The day she submitted them, she collapsed onto the couch and exhaled a shaky laugh. "Now we just wait, right?" I smiled, heart pounding with fatherly pride. "Yeah, kiddo, now we let them see the awesome candidate you are." As for me, the nightmares waned. Occasionally, I'd still jolt awake from old war memories or flickers of Claire's betrayal, but therapy sessions at a local vet center helped. My therapist, Dr. Lennox, a calm woman with warm brown eyes, guided me through practical strategies for coping. "Trauma doesn't vanish," she explained gently, "but you can learn to coexist with it, to thrive despite it." And I was trying day by day. One cool autumn evening, I found myself at our modest kitchen table, flipping through a stack of bills and bank statements. Caldwell had given me a small raise, enough to consider purchasing a used car for Ava once she turned 18. The notion of planning for a stable future felt surreal, like I was living a life that once seemed out of reach. Ava wandered in wearing pajamas and carrying a letter. My pulse quickened. Was it from Claire again? But when she grinned, I realized it was from the Naval Academy. "Dad," she whispered, eyes alight with excitement. "I think this is it." We both stood in the kitchen, the overhead light buzzing softly as she tore open the envelope. Her eyes scanned the page, breath catching. Then a shriek of joy escaped her, and she practically jumped into my arms. "I got in!" she exclaimed, voice cracking with emotion. "They accepted me, Dad!" For a second, I couldn't speak. Pride swelled in my chest, and tears burned at the corners of my eyes. I held her tight, letting out a quiet laugh of disbelief. "That's amazing," I managed. "You did it, Cadet Morgan." She pulled back, tears shining. "We did it. You were there every step, Dad." I let out a trembling breath. "All you. I'm just the support staff." She wiped her tears, reading the letter again. "They have a summer start date. Physical conditioning, orientation, the whole 9 yards. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "I'll be away from home, though, and you'll be here alone." I shook my head. "I'll manage. This is your dream. Don't hold back for me." The following days became a blur of planning medical exams, final paperwork, a new workout regimen to ensure Ava arrived in top shape. She'd spend the next few months finishing high school strong, then off to the academy for her next chapter. Our humble rental home buzzed with excitement. Time whipped by like a brisk wind. Graduation day arrived in a flourish of caps and gowns, with me snapping photos from the stands. Stonebridge High's ceremony was small but heartfelt, speeches praising resilience and community spirit. I watched Ava cross the stage, her posture straight, accepting her diploma with a dazzling smile. Pride nearly lifted me from my seat. Afterward, Miss Alvarez and Master Sergeant Rivera approached, congratulating her. Hallie, hugging Ava from the side, teased, "Future naval officer over here." The air hummed with promise, the culmination of a year that saw Ava transform from a wounded soul to a confident young woman. That evening, we hosted a modest celebration at the house. Miss Martin dropped by with homemade lemon bars. Will Brooks popped in to say hi, offering a couple of silly gag gifts for Ava's new journey. My phone buzzed with well wishes from Marcus Reeves and Rachel, who were too far to attend but sent congratulatory messages. Ava glowed under the attention. When the gathering wound down, father and daughter slipped into the backyard under a sky glittering with stars. The faint hum of traffic drifted from a nearby road, but everything else was quiet. Ava flopped into a plastic chair, still wearing her graduation gown unzipped. I slouched in the one next to her, exhaustion mingling with joy. "Dad," she said softly, "can you believe we made it here?" Her gaze swept the yard, and I knew she was remembering the hardships we'd left behind. I inhaled the crisp air. Some days I doubted, but seeing you in that cap and gown, my voice wavered. "I'm so proud, kiddo." She leaned her head on my shoulder, a comfortable familiarity we'd developed through tough times. "It's weird, you know? Mom's not here. Sometimes I wonder if she even knows I graduated, but I guess I made peace with it." I nodded, chest tightening. Claire's letter remained in Ava's desk drawer, unopened for months. She chose not to answer it, not yet. "I think she'd be proud of you too," I said quietly, the truth tasting bittersweet. Ava's eyes glistened. "I guess, but that doesn't change what happened." We sat there in companionable silence, letting the night breeze brush over us. A sense of closure washed in. She didn't need Claire's validation, nor did I. We'd built something stronger in Stonebridge, a genuine bond tempered by adversity. A week later, I drove Ava to the Naval Academy's campus for the initial orientation. The place bustled with new recruits lugging duffel bags, nervous parents saying tearful goodbyes. My stomach nodded. This was the first time Ava and I would be truly separated since everything fell apart. But it was for a cause she believed in. She stood by the car, uniform crisp, hair tucked neatly under her cap. "Well, Dad," she breathed, scanning the imposing buildings. "This is it." I forced a chuckle to mask my own nerves. "You'll do great. You've survived worse." She hugged me fiercely, emotions surging in that single gesture. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. I held on tight, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Go show 'em what you're made of." She nodded, shouldering her bag, eyes bright and determined. With a final wave, she joined the line of incoming cadets. I stood there a long moment, heart swelling with love and pride, until the crowd swallowed her up. Driving back to Stonebridge alone felt surreal. The empty passenger seat reminded me of how far we'd come. When I reached home, I found it strangely quiet, no Ava rummaging in the kitchen, no squeals of frustration over math homework. I realized my life had changed in ways that might have scared me once, but now I felt a peace that had eluded me for years. That night, I stepped onto the back porch with a mug of tea, gazing at the star-speckled sky. Memories flashed, the betrayal, the revenge, the trials, the move each step forging an unbreakable bond between me and my daughter. I closed my eyes, letting the night air carry away the last vestiges of old pain. In the hush, I pictured Ava at the academy, forging her path. I saw myself continuing my work at Caldwell, maybe even buying a house here in Stonebridge. The future glowed with possibilities we'd once believed lost. And so I stood, quietly embracing tomorrow, a tomorrow unburdened by betrayal, shaped by the love that survived every storm. We hadn't just outrun our past, we'd transformed it into the foundation for something new, something real. With that certainty settling into my bones, I whispered a silent thank you to the universe, turned off the porch light, and stepped back inside, ready, at last, to live in hope instead of fear.